Yeah, New York City, Dr. Doom Pebblestone. I took the Batmobile out last night. Went to Tony Rome's. And I seen exaggeration. Spotting fools front and fly, girls act material. 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 I spot MCs on BET with the fake zirconia bezel Rolex, looking like version with the see-through backboard from the Indian kid off the rack. Still in silver delivery. Y'all trying to fool me, acting bougie with the platinum wannabe. It look real, stainless steel appeals. That's not the presidential. Let's keep it confidential. You ordered that from the kid in the ad and the sauce, boss. Step up your rep up in genuine fashion. I caught your assin' with your name on the rented car lease. Feather dove hat, zoot suits with vinyl alligator boots. Extreme dream with no apartment space. You partner the fly ride in an empty place. With your rent due on the first of the month, your second month, your exit. Portraying the girls like you everything in the world. Front master, prepare to face disaster as I pass you. Moving Galactica with no capacity. You ain't got enough to buy a small soda than Johnny Rockets be. Posing with boarhead black girls with a Florida tan, trying to act like you the man. Starstruck with $1, your girl look like Donald Duck. Party figure perpetrator, undercover hater, smell your cheap cologne in the elevator. Dope, you smoke, half y'all out there never touch the mink coat. With your 4-carat white gold, you look like your Panama man. Trying to rhyme off on flexible facial bone structure. I crush you down to the paso like spicy foods burning through your asshole. Remember I did the damage to your lasso, then threw your pampers in the manhole. Your engineer walked away with ponytails like Annie Mae, laughing and talking the other way. You was the first rapper to pull out grease and turn your butt the other way. Your girl think you're tough, big, buff, and rough. 90% of these rappers are very soft. Spotting fools front and fly, girls act material. 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 I look at your audience and fan base, nothing but a bunch of men tapping each other on the back again. Fools with backpacks trying to show me their ass crack. Cigarette lighters blowing smoke on my polo shirt. You're bound to get hurt. With one leg trying to walk to work on the mic, you rap hard and overexert. Material girls catch diarrhea, won't make it to my concert. It don't have to be 4th of July for you rectum to see fireworks. While you buy clothes at Ross on and weaves trying to floss. Walking in large restaurants, ordering a small bowl of chicken broth. Water and napkins, you ain't trying to be a captain. Put down this whack acting skills from movies. Send you to Nico lobbies like a groupie. Stage fright, out of sight, cover your ass up. Prepare, I pull my mask up. Watch your costume, jewelry, kid. Spotting fools front and fly, girls act material. 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 Clean up your room. Go clean up your room. Clean your room, otherwise you'll be on punishment.
Hello everybody, good evening. Official is here and I'm waiting on corruption in boxing. He'll jump in any moment, so please just give me a second first of all. I'm just setting up the thumbnail. Okay, so first of all, sorry that we were not able to go live on air the last night. We were kind of busy, and by the way, there were a couple of shows on air. So, and anyways, we were not yet able to watch the fights, all the fights that happened. So it's better sometimes like this time, for example, to just wait a bit, give ourselves some time, some extra time to watch all the fights and prepare the show and give you the best show that you deserve. Yeah, so I mean, what I'm trying to say is he'll jump on any moment. By the way, uh, at this time, after all the things he said about PBC, he's hiding in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and Al Haymon is looking to drone him. But unlike Julian Assange, uh, corruption isn't getting any visits from Pamela Anderson. Instead, a girl who's paying him visits, bringing him cookies, and coming there to give him blowjobs is Cherry Kiss. Yeah. Anyways, what's tonight's topic? Of course, Errol Spence Jr. versus Danny Garcia that happened just this weekend. Fox pay-per-view. Also in England, Anthony Yarde fought Lyndon Arthur for, if I'm not wrong, the Commonwealth title at 175 at light heavyweight. But there are also two more topics that I'm extremely interested in covering, and those are, well, first of all, Usyk claiming, giving us, how could I put it? In his last interview, he was talking, so Usyk himself was talking about leaving his promoters, and it was an extremely interesting interview, so I'll have to get to it. And also, big breakdown for the Donner Rodriguez fight that's happening, if I'm not wrong, the next weekend, or not, or no, is it perhaps happening on the 19th of December or the 12th? I cannot remember, can't remember at all. Probably the 12th, but tonight we are going to break down some of Rodriguez's fights, as I prepared a lot of clips. So the next episode, yeah, I think the fight is happening on the 19th of this month, because what I was trying to do was to do the breakdown of Emmanuel Manny Rodriguez tonight, and do the breakdown of Donner's fights the next week. Yeah, so I'm wondering where is corruption, but I'm sure he'll jump in at any moment. I sent him the link, and by the way, if you want to help the show grow, please share the links, recommend us. I'm just wondering if the Ecuadorian embassy is all right. Maybe they're going through some power shortages. So I don't know where's corruption yet, but I'm waiting on him. I'm just wondering, should I just jump straight in or wait on him a bit? Because he told me earlier, half an hour ago, or a bit more, that he will be ready for the show. Just let me check it on my Discord. Wow, he haven't wrote me anything since, but okay, let's go on. I don't know, I'll probably start with Anthony Yarde versus Lyndon Arthur. And I can tell you one thing. I'm extremely surprised that so many people saw a close fight. In fact, what surprised me this weekend is that my scorecards for both fights, both main events, Yarde versus Arthur and also Spence versus Garcia, are just opposite of what most of the people were posting for their scorecards all over the internet, the boxing shows. But yeah, in my opinion, I saw a clear victory for Lyndon Arthur. Now he was not doing much, but it's not at all as if he was running away. Very opposite on the opposite. What he was doing, he was jabbing, timing every jab, nothing special, but using his longer arm reach. And his jab that is very good, and he was just stepping out of range. He was never running away. In fact, you can say that Arthur Lyndon, he was not quite stationary, but he was not moving a lot. He was just moving just a step out of Anthony Yarde's range. And I think that this fight was much more about Yarde being extremely cautious. And, first of all, as we learned in his previous fights, that his gas tank is, at least, to mildly put it, extremely questionable. So he had to conserve his energy. But not that he was also very, very hesitant to step in. It was because that's exactly why I'm telling you all. This fight was not a case of Lyndon Arthur just jabbing and running away scared. Not at all. In fact, he just did enough to step out just a bit, slightly out of Yarde's range, waiting for him to step in, and he was ready to throw another jab immediately after taking half a step back with his rear foot. Yeah, so Yarde did nothing special. He showed no emergency, fighting at such a low pace, and Arthur's jab was definitely giving him problems, but he was not doing anything, not coming up with any answer, was not being effective. In fact, in my opinion, and most of you are going to be shocked, I gave Yarde 3 rounds, and I could see him winning in between 2 to 4 rounds, and giving him 4 rounds would be extremely generous, in my opinion, to anyone who was paying a close attention to what punches were landing and what punches were not landing. There were some close rounds that Arthur was winning, not by a much, but clearly outpointing him, landing cleaner jab, while Yarde was swinging and still being hesitant to jump in and, try to bait or find a solution for Arthur's jab to counter it. So he was just using his upper body from the outside and using some terrible bad feints, but Arthur was cautious, and Yarde was he showed me a clear lack of emergency, like I told you, probably coupled with his extremely questionable gas tank. But yeah, I could say that you could maybe give Yarde Fourth round, which was again, it was close. The sixth round as well, it was the same thing. Yarde was able to land a couple of good punches there, but so was Lyndon Arthur. And again, the sixth round was another close round. And then okay as well. In some of the later rounds, there were kinda close rounds, but I think that Lyndon Arthur won them. And then the last round, the 12th round, was where Anthony Yarde finally, started going forward and acting as a live body for once in this fight. And yeah, he heard him. I think it was the overhand right over the jab. So, but too little, too late. Good evening, Bucks. Thank you for tuning in. And anyone else listening now, or the ones that are going to listen to the show later tomorrow after the live show ends. We are still waiting on corruption. Like I told you, he's hiding at the Ecuadorian embassy, and Cherokee is paying him visits. Al Haymon is trying to drone the embassy. So we all wish corruption good luck, and we are hoping he'll jump in, because he was supposed to jump in. So expect him to jump in any moment. Yeah, but okay. Hey, Saint Brit Sports. Hello. Yeah, but what I was saying about this Arthur versus Yarde fight, to me it was not that hard to score it, and I'm honestly shocked about how many people said that it was a close fight, while it was not close at all. It was pretty easy to score, man. I once again, it was not as if Arthur was landing some weak jab and then running away. No, so he was just stepping out, just one step out of Yarde's range after throwing his jabs, and his jabs were very good, and he was timing Yarde stepping in and countering him with it. So it was not a soft jab at all. What else I was about to say? Yeah, a clear case of Yarde just being too cautious and too afraid to step in for 11 rounds. Yeah, and Saint Brit agrees with me. He had it 8-4 for Arthur. Although I was saying Saint, even 4 rounds, in my opinion, is extremely cautious. I personally hesitate in between giving him 3 or 2 rounds. But that's just my opinion. And now he was look, around the Kovalev fight, while everybody was shitting and hating on Yarde, look, it was a guy that I never saw before, and I was not hating on him at all. Although I saw that people disliked his coach. I mean, the way he boxes, it doesn't really look he has a coach. Yeah, I mean, maybe there's some good chemistry in between them, and they like each other. Maybe Anthony Yarde thinks he's good for him. He's feeling, feeling well working with him. But man, the trainer, that coach, is terrible for him. And by the way, you can talk shit, like a lot of trainers are doing, and then still be a good coach. But the way the things I'm seeing from Yarde, or what I'm not seeing, tells me He's not such a good of a trainer. So yeah, going back to the Kovalev fight, around the Kovalev fight, all the shit talk from Lance in the camp, yes, Bucks, all the shit talk and pumping Yarde up from his coach. I was just seeing it just as something that his coach is saying. There was no need for me to diss Yarde or say bad things about him. If anything else, he does seems to me, or he seemed to me to this point, as a quiet, humble kid, you know. Yeah, but most of the people were mixing it up as if Yarde was shit talking instead of his coach around and before the Kovalev fight. But now my problem with Yarde himself, right after this fight, was his post-fight interview. Hold on, Box is asking me what's that about. Yeah, Buck saying Yarde never has any sparring in camp. Well, I don't know. I'm questioning, you know, how true is it? Maybe true, you know. It depends. For sure, some coaches would prefer their fighters not to take a lot of damage and do the drills instead, something like that. But I would really be surprised if it was the truth. I honestly doubt it, Bucks. But maybe I'm not saying that I'm right about it, but I seriously doubt it. If I had to bet on it, I would bet on Anthony Yarde having some, at least some sparring in his training camps. Yeah, but in this post-fight interview, he was acting really disappointed. Not even disappointed. He was extremely angry at the results. Don't get me wrong. He was giving Lyndon Arthur respect. He was, you know, he was not being trashy, you know, he was not trying to trash Lyndon, but he was so disillusional, saying that he was robbed and that he deserved the victory, that he did more. Well, it couldn't be further from true. What else was I about to say about that situation? Yeah, look, I mean, I can understand fighters after the fight because I can understand fighters being wrong in the post-fight interviews because look at this. They just ended their fight, and plus adrenaline is pumping, etc. And they didn't have the opportunity to watch their fight from the third eye view. But it's questionable. It's questionable if even rewatching the fight would change something for Arthur, because the sense that I got was that still his coach was pumping him up, and I mean it's a good thing to, you know, it depends from fighter to fighter and from a coach to coach to give your fighter confidence, saying that he's winning, but you could see it in front of your eyes, his coach turning Yarde into a monster in front of your eyes, because he was pumping him up, saying in between the rounds that he was winning the rounds, winning those rounds, and then at the end of the fight, you have Yarde being angry at the scorecards, acting as if he was, as if he got robbed, you know. And I was extremely surprised by, I mean, by such a close scorecards. Yeah, so like me, like saying to like corruption himself. we scored it as a clean victory for Lyndon Arthur. But those scorecards, first of all, those for Lyndon were too close, and the one for for Yarde, was it 117, 111? I think so. Yeah, a clear robbery, and well, oh, I forgot his name. What's his promoter's name? Oh, I forgot it. What's his name? It's oh, doesn't matter. but yeah, it, everybody knows him. His name is on top of my tongue, but let's just call him Fish Eyes. Fish Eyes something because everybody's calling him Fish Eyes. Frank Foreign. Yeah, he clearly tried to rob Arthur Lyndon in favor of his one of his only stars after Daniel Dubois showed not to be on the level he was hoping for Dubois to be. Yeah, Vox Frank Warren. Yeah. Yeah. By the way, good job from Lyndon Arthur's sponsor, because watching that fight, it got me watching it live. By the way, sorry for the background noise, but watching the fight live, his sponsor's website on the front of his trunk got me really curious. That right in between the first and the second round, I went to Google. I went to my browser to type in the name of his sponsor, because by the name of that website, I was hoping to go to some occult website and buy tickets for their next orgy. But in fact, it was just a site, clothesline, clothing, selling polos, things like that. So big up to them. Big up to what's their name? Terrace Cult. That's some free commercial for them. Big up to Arthur. Hey, Fight Night, aka Precise. By the way, shout out to you. Visit Fight Film YouTube. Corruption was supposed to be here, and I'm expecting him to jump in. Precise. I'm just wondering what's going on again for the third time. Half an hour before I started the show, he told me he will be ready. I sent him the link, so he'll jump in any moment. And once again, for the third time, he's hiding at the Ecuadorian embassy because Al Haymon is trying to drone him. But instead of Pamela Anderson, he has Cherry Kiss visiting him and giving him the blowjobs. Shout out to you, Precise. I hope Corruption is going to jump in any moment. I'm still waiting on him. By the way, big up Reality versus Voice. Fish Eyes, yeah. Just call him Fish Eyes. Reality versus Voice, also saying lemons in the camp. Yeah, but you know what? Before me switching the subject. Oh, I think I already forgot. No. I know what I was about to say about Yarde versus Arthur. Yes, it kind of looked like the way it went on was quite similar to Dubois versus Joyce. Although, yeah, Joyce was more hard-handed. Is more hard-handed. And it was not it was not exactly the same fight, but game plans and the way it went on was pretty similar to me. Only that at the end, Yarde was able to step up and in the last round and finally try something, show that he's alive. Let me just take a sip of water. Okay, I'm back. So let's light up a cigarette. Yeah, so what should I start with? I'm hesitating in between Spence versus Danny Garcia and Usyk versus his promoters. And I would love to hear both corruption, both topics. But yeah, anyways, fuck it. Let's go to Errol Spence Jr. versus Danny Garcia, and hopefully corruption would be able to jump in and give his opinion on this fight, because I have a clear opinion on it and I would be more than interested in hearing his. By the way, I have some notes here. Oh yeah, reality versus voice. He's saying Tande can't even remember the gum shield. But you know what? What's very interesting about it? Was it really the case of him forgetting Yarde's gum shield, or was he buying him some extra time? Because once again, I'm mentioning his questionable gas tank. So think about it as well. By the way, yeah, so I'm about to start talking about, oh, corruption in boxing is joining in. Great. He probably skipped. Corruption probably wanted to skip this fight because Yarde versus Arthur, because it was nothing special. And by the way, shout out to everybody listening. I am about to add corruption in. Corruption, the floor is yours. Or do you want to say anything about Yarde versus Lyndon Arthur? 1-2, 1-2. I don't know if you're talking corruption because I cannot hear you, but I'm just letting you know that you're in. Oh, you're there?
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Sorry about. It's been a bit of a crazy day.
Sorry, can you just turn your volume a bit?
How's that? How's that?
Oh, that's good. That's good. Thank you. The floor is yours.
All right, what are we talking?
Well, I just ended talking about Anthony Yarde versus Lyndon Arthur fight. So I don't know if you want to talk about that fight before switching the subject, or whatever you like.
One second now. All right. Yeah, sorry. Apologies, everybody, for the on my late appearance, lack of preparation, but all right. The fight official, I know you was doing your video analysis when the fight was on, but we talked about it briefly last week in the sense that Anthony Yarde had a difficult year. He obviously lost his father and his grandfather to the coronavirus. So mentally, it was going to be interesting to see how well he would have done with with the extended sort of bereavement period. Lyndon Arthur, the bookies didn't give him much of a chance, despite being the champion. But trained by Pat Barrett, he adopted a style of boxing Yarde, who they probably perceived to be the more heavy-handed fighter. Once again, we saw a fighter who utilizes the basic fundamentals to try and keep a power puncher at bay, landing just simple fundamentals, not a lot of power punches, and Yarde, for a shorter fighter, he showed great difficulties in having the ability to box at a longer range. He had no game whatsoever. He couldn't box his way closer, which he needed to do. He was just occasionally trying to land the jab. When your opponent is jabbing, obviously you want to try and jab with your opponent, but his punch activity was next to nothing, landing the occasional right hands. But it was a strategic, sort of tense, unspectacular boxing match for pretty much the entire fight. Not really an exciting fight. Lyndon Arthur, if he has aspirations of going forward at light heavyweight, he's not going to be able to do it by simply firing a jab, especially against some of the power punches and some of the more adept boxers who can work around the target, who can cut distance, who can use very good feints, get underneath, change levels. Multi-dimensional boxers like Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol. I think Yarde only really has himself to blame. It was a pretty poor self-inflicted game plan. Very angry after the fight, but when you only step it up and pin your opponent up against the ropes and start unloading some combinations and just wailing away with your heavy hands, and you're definitely hurting your opponent in the 12th round, then naturally it begs the question, why couldn't you have started walking down your opponent a lot sooner? He is the champion, so you're going to have to show the judges that you're more than capable of seizing the title from him, rather than just winning a very close decision and relying on some bitch-ass A-side shit because you're a far more marketable Frank Warren fighter. You're on many sports campaigns and billboards around London, so you're the far more renowned boxer. You've obviously had a world championship fight as well in Russia. Not really a lot to say official. I felt watching it live as well. I felt Lyndon Arthur did enough, and he wasn't just landing the jabs, he was landing right hands as well. There was some confusion about whether his right hand was hurt, but he indicated that he was unable to land the right hand, so it wasn't hurt. Something Tundi had communicated to Anthony by around the 8th round. Yeah, I don't know why Lyndon was too passive during the post-fight interview, a little bit too apologetic. You should have just said to Anthony, well, you did nothing. You weren't pressing the fight at all. I was controlling the fight with the jab, so I was technically the ring general, because if I'm preventing a power puncher from cutting off the ring and landing combinations and knocking me out, attacking my body, so therefore my defense is obviously better than yours as well, because he was just able to spin off and try and roll the punches. Didn't hurt Anthony, didn't really have the power, but definitely won his respect. Landed some nice, just single right hands, just when he needed to, when Anthony was maybe contemplating pressing the action. So yeah, Lyndon Arthur, in my humble opinion, won the fight. Relatively close, but it's a fight that I wanted to see again because of the small margins. When you're dealing with fights where the punch volume is so low, it prompts video analysis and it prompts slow motion just to ensure that the single or so punches that may have swung some of these very close and competitive rounds, one or two or even 5 punches makes a difference. So I just wanted to make sure that they were landing cleanly on the chin and they weren't blocked or and one of these fights is quite easy to do your own punch count because they're not going to be landing more than 70-80 punches for the entire 12 rounds, maybe 100 maximum, but relatively low volume. So if I get time from next week just as a side project, I'm going to try and watch the fight again. But I think around the 7 rounds to 5 for Lyndon Arthur, I think it's a fair scorecard.
Oh, okay. So you had it closer than me. Yeah. So okay. I just have one point to make, and then a question to ask you. Yeah, you did a great job of mentioning that right hand. By the way, after the fight, I was not watching a clip, but I saw a title of YouTube video saying that it looks like. Arthur's trainer admitted that he indeed hurt his right hand before the fight, but still, yeah, he was not throwing enough of right hands, but Yarde for them sure didn't neither. In my opinion, he threw more right hands than Yarde himself. By the way, I'm not sure if we are live on air because my PC just froze, so I'm restarting it. Are you there, Corruption?
No, you're right. I mean, if there was a problem or there wasn't a problem, we don't really know. I'm not sure whether he's had his hand x-rayed or the knuckles were just a little bit sore, but there was something missing from Anthony, whether it was psychological. There's always a bit of trauma in terms of carrying some of the physical scars from a previous fight that I just carried forward. It could be that, he was a little bit reticent about his chin, further to being knocked out by Sergey Kovalev. He talked about not being reckless, so maybe that partially explains a very cautious, defensively minded strategy in which he was just going to try and pick single punches, try and hurt his opponent, and then maybe walk him down at the penultimate sort of rounds and try and knock him out. But just started far too late, and you only have yourself to blame when you put in the sudden injection of 20-30 power punches in the last round to try and take out your opponent. If you're being extra kind, maybe it was a 10-8, give him a 10-8, but I don't think so. Frank Warren, he may make the rematch. Yarde is naturally he wants to try and avenge what he deems to be an extremely controversial loss. So I'm sure they'll have a rematch at some point next year. And on the basis of what I saw, I think Yarde, you may give him the advantage, given that he knows that he can hurt his opponent by effectively walking him down, trapping him up against the ropes, and landing some hard body punches. Certainly for somebody who has 2-3 inches in height, has a long sort of body, so why not target that body? Certainly against a boxer, you've got to try and use the polar opposite strategy, not try and box with a boxer, but try and the Achilles heel for a boxer is always a pressure fighter, so put pressure. You've got the power as well, so throw caution to your defense. If you're also worried about your stamina, which it appears to be, because he's a very muscular athlete as well, so it's maybe a combination of him being a little bit reticent about his chin and his gas tank, and he's trying to pace himself. So recalibrate your strategy, and I'm sure Yarde can find that balance in the rematch, and I would favour him to win the rematch if and when it happens.
Yeah, that's a good point. I haven't really thought about what would happen in a rematch if the rematch takes place based on what we just saw this weekend. Yeah, but I would agree with you. At least I'm sure he would start much sooner in the rematch, and that rematch is probably going to happen. And plus, it looks like he really hurt Lyndon after. By the way, I just wanted to let you know, I'm not sure what's happening if corruption. If you're busy tonight, I can take it on my own. If you're busy, if you have something to do, just let me know. Don't feel obligated to be here.
The coup d'etat rolls on. Let's.
Okay. But I'm just letting you know, just in case, whatever, you know.
Also on that card we had. Did you talk about the bantamweight Dennis McCann?
Oh, I haven't, because see, I saw one of his previous fights, but during this whole card, except for the main event, I was preparing my clips on Emmanuel Rodriguez, so I missed it.
No problem.
But from what I remember, he's a really nice, talented fighter. I enjoyed one of his previous fights that I caught live.
And this was a decent fight official. For the first time, we saw McCann being extended rounds. He is around sort of 5'10", 5'11", maybe even slightly taller for a bantamweight. So massive. 19 years old, athletically gifted. One of those reflex twitch fighters that tends to use upper body movement, keeping your hands low, firing explosive punches. Has a bit of power by the speed he generates through the shots. But we saw his opponent, Matos, I believe he was from Portugal, may have had a record of around 7-3. I'm just speculating on top of my head, but it was something like that. Slightly more experienced, much shorter opponent, as you can imagine. You know, Dennis is going to probably have all the numerical advantages at bantamweight, given his size and sort of length. But in an 8-round fight, I gave Matos 3 rounds. I think he won the 4th, 5th, and the 6th. Certainly put some pressure on, showed some punch resistance, didn't capitulate like a lot of McCann's opponents thus far. So this is what we advocated for Daniel Dubois, if you recall, official, that you need these type of opponents, especially for young fighters during their maturation when they've not competed at major amateur tournaments, to try and acclimate against all different styles, potential future world champions who have that raw talent there and then. So that sort of seasoning at a very early age is critical. You need proper field experience, and Frank's opponents for a lot of these cards, especially for the undercard fighters, have been absolutely diabolical. So this fight, I think, will benefit Dennis massively going forward. He knows that he's going to have to try and change his game plan, and he was trying to do that. He was taking power off his punches, luring his opponent, touch shots, touch jab, 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 left hand, and then suddenly try and mix in harder punches. That was working very well, but given his hand positions were low, once he's recoiled, that allowed Matos just to get a little bit lower, tuck his chin down, and try and loop the right hand, not even looking at McCann. So trying to come anti-clockwise all around the clock against the sort of periphery of McCann's vision, and he was catching him with the right hand. So it was a good tactic. Taller fighters always have a problem against these shorter fighters who try and exploit these crazy angles with these wide punches, or sometimes get underneath the punches to force the taller fighter to sort of punch down, and that allows the punches not to be delivered with the same sort of pounds per square inch force, because they're having to punch down at a crazy sort of angle. So Matos was game. He was expected to be blown over very quickly. Showed great resistance. I give him credit. McCann, reasonably good performance. I think it was a bit of a shock to him that his opponent didn't go down and lasted the duration as well. Some of the body shots McCann landed, and given we've got no crowd, we could hear the acoustic sort of winces of Matos. So the body punches were hurting him, but he didn't attack the body. And it's always harder for a much taller fighter to land. It's more of it's far more dangerous for him to land body shots against a much shorter opponent, because once again, unless you're really bending down, and he's going to bend down at least 4 inches to try and get leverage So he's landing almost like straight punches or even hooks without arcing and losing punch power or velocity. So, but he's going to have difficulties such as this against a lot of his opponents, because he's going to be at least he's going to be even 6 inches taller than some of these fighters at bantamweight. Isaac Dogbo's a bantamweight and he's 5'2". McCann is 5'10", 5'11". So you're talking his height differential, it can be as much as 8 inches. So it's not going to be easy for him against some of these shorter opponents who have good punch resistance. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. I think he'll be better once he starts moving up in weights, gets bigger, stronger. Eventually he'll get his man strength and he'll be fighting fighters that are tall, and he'll be able to get better leverage on his shots. He's not going to have to, punch down as much as the frustrations of doing at the moment. So, but good fighter, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why Frank was able to let go of a lot of his experienced veteran fighters like Billy Joe Saunders, etc. All of that old garbage. He's got people like him, Hamza Shiraz, some young talent, and Frank is just recycling the model he's done for 40 years. Find very good young British talents, take them through area level, British, Commonwealth, European, World Championships. That's been his mantra since he's been in promotion. He's done it with so many, British fighters, something Eddie Hearn really hasn't. That's Frank's sort of modus operandi, and I think he's got 2 or 3 good fighters that he could potentially do the same against. So let's hope the matchmakers deliver on that sense.
Yeah, you're completely right about it, because I was about to say, I was thinking about the same thing. Look, Frank Warren, he doesn't have any superstar in his stable at the moment, but on the other hand, he can survive thanks to those young talents that he has, like McCann, like we saw in the previous on the previous card, Hamza Shiraz. Man, that's another very talented fighter. So yeah, and look, I'm not very aware of his promoting history, so I don't know what are the other talents that he brought up in the past. But listening to you, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And so I'm thinking back, I suppose he's the one who discovered Tyson Fury as well, and took him along the ranks, etc. So yeah, good job from Frank in that sense.
Yeah, he had Nassim Hamids, he had the Chris Eubanks, and the Nigel Benns mega fights that they were putting on before. He took the space of Mickey Duff, and then the Hearns arrived in boxing after, and they pretty much took the deal on Sky Sports, and Frank had a lot of sort of rebuilding, and he launched his own Box Nation channel, which wasn't a bad sort of concept, but Sky had the exclusive contract with Matchroom. The money was there. Box Nation was a channel on the Sky platform, so there was still royalties to be paid for Sky. I guess he wanted an independent relationship, and now Box Nation has become a little bit dormant, which is sad. And Frank has now moved over to BT Sports with all of his fighters, and BT, a former monopoly, telecommunications monopoly, has expanded since deregulation. They've expanded into diversified industry, sports, advertising, products, mobile phones, etc. Everything. A massive amount of capital. A lot of the sports that were being showed on Sky Broadcasting Corporation, like Test match cricket, Formula One, UFC, etc., that were all on Sky channels, are now all going on. BT are bidding for the rights, and they become a bit of a juggernaut, very, very leveraged in the amount of money that they've spent on sports. So they've definitely got money, and you can see by their studios as well. It's tremendous. It looks so much better than what Frank had before, and he pretty much runs his boxing empire, I think, from his house in Hertfordshire. Eddie Hearn always berates Frank for the bankruptcy of his company, lack of income he has, but Frank doesn't have a bad business model in terms of what he does with young fighters. Or something Eddie Hearn doesn't really do that. He just tends to buy these financial mercenaries who are ready to fight. Amir Khan is always the perfect example for, Eddie Hearn. The amount of criticism that he levied to Amir Khan over the years, criticizing how much tickets he sold against Devon Alexander, etc. And then when he signs Amir Khan, completely changes his, as you can imagine, starts praising Amir Khan. It's just the hypocrisy and double standards of these promoters is extraordinary.
Yeah, by the way, to me, Frank Warren is an equivalent of Arsene Wenger looking for the new talents in the kindergarten, while Eddie Hearn is like what was Real Madrid back in the day, just paying mercenaries, offering the top money and having connections. But yeah.
Frank he's survived, gunshot wounds to the head. So
Yeah.
he's like Boris in the film Snatch. You just can't kill him.
Yeah.
Boris the Blade.
Good old Frank. Okay, so what should be the next topic? Do you want us to go to Spence Garcia or talk about Usyk?
This is all news to me. I saw that you mentioned something about Usyk. I'm hoping it ties in to all of my rhetoric recently about Usyk and Eddie Hearn. I haven't seen no news whatsoever, so I'm all ears, as they say. I'm very keen for you to give me some good news about Usyk.
Oh, great! So you will be positively surprised because it's very along the lines that you've been mentioning on the previous shows. So I would like to say thank you to L-Dog, big up to him, because thanks to him sharing the interview on Twitter, it was an interview that Usyk did on his on his own YouTube page. And so don't worry, I have everything here. I'm gonna share screen because I have everything. I took a lot of screenshots and I'm just getting it ready. So if you just give me a couple of seconds so I can prepare it, and I'll go deeper into it. But yeah, go on.
So the news came courtesy of the coup d'etat of boxing's heavyweight matchmaker El Doggo.
Yeah. Yeah, so the interview, it was pretty good. I'm still preparing the screenshots because I took
I would
40
just,
of them.
I would just like to say to L-Dog, for all of your endeavors and contribution to this podcast, once Official and myself have accomplished our coup d'etat of Thailand in Bavaria and our new headquarters is set up, royalties will be tabulated to in due course.
Absolutely. Yeah, so he did a great job sharing that interview on Twitter. Yeah, so let me screen share it. I got it ready. Hold on. Yeah, so this about the first line is what the interview is saying. In my opinion, Eddie Hearn was not interested in you winning, and as you can see, Usyk answer, well, it's possible. Of course, he went on deeper into it, but he. First of all, he showed that he's very aware of what you've been saying, corruption, and what we
Usyk
were already.
heard the coup d'etat of boxing and he heard me on BDA as well.
Yeah.
Because I've
So
spoken to him before and James Ali Bashir, so
hold on. Let me see what's the
see,
next.
to me, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I have accentuated this. Had Anthony Joshua won the undisputed cruiserweight championship and indicated to Eddie Hearn that he was immediately ready for a title shot at heavyweight, that he didn't need an acclimation period, Eddie Hearn would have used the WBO super status or whatever he was elevated to, and enforced to give them a couple of Hungarian hookers and some wire payments to a tax haven in the US Virgin Islands. That happens all the time, and I'll prove it in going forward. The WBO would have conceded, and Eddie Hearn's golden goose, Anthony Joshua, would have got a title shot. So he had all of the capabilities, the political connections, the clout, but the Dillian White was a scenario when he was used as a spare tire, and Usyk not so much as a spare tire, but to me it became very clear that Eddie Hearn didn't feared Usyk for far more, and he absolutely doesn't want he absolutely does not want the championship belts on him, and that fight told me everything you needed to know about it, because Joshua should not have even been in that building, number one, and the roadblocks that have been put up is ridiculous. And Official, what I want to say as well, there's so much criticism regarding Usyk's first opponent, Chaz Witherspoon, but name me any other heavyweight champion from Joe Louis going all the way forward, Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier's, Ken Norton's. Did any of them win the Golden Gloves championships by knockouts in every single fight? Chaz was the only one to do so, and he had an 8-fight winning record as well. So he was not a bad opponent. Yes, he was out of boxing for a long time, but that guy could punch. And watch him early on in these days, at the amateurs as well. He was a murderous puncher, but he was a very last-minute opponent, as we'll keep indicating. But that's just a side point. Do you want to carry on with what you were saying before?
Yeah. Before that, I would just like to add to what you're just saying. Look, and we should not forget that Usyk was coming off multiple injuries, and that before that he was already supposed to fight not only Chisora, but even before Chisora, he wanted to fight, and they wanted to make a fight his heavyweight debut fight to be Usyk versus Oleksandr Povetkin. And from what I heard, I don't know how true is it. It was Povetkin that didn't really wanted that fight, and I may be wrong, but. And I'm not saying it's true, but I cannot forget exactly who said it. I think that Usyk said it in also on his YouTube channel in some of his earlier interview on the channel or somewhere else. I think that he was the one saying that he sent the offer to Oleksandr Povetkin, and plus talking about that fight against Chaz Witherspoon. Man, people were acting as if he was getting pissed up, while in reality he was coming off an injury, multiple injuries, not 10 injuries, but multiple injuries, and he was doing extremely well, and he maybe got caught with 2 right hands, and still was performing very well, in my opinion, from I can remember from that fight. But back to screenshots. So yeah, the interview is talking about Sergey. I don't remember if it's the official trainer of Usyk at the moment, and who else?
That's Yuri Kachenko.
Okay, so it may be Sergey, maybe a guy from K2 Promotions.
Yes, he's Usyk's manager from K2. Yeah.
Yeah. So day before Chisora fight, so they went on to check the gloves, and as you can read it, and Sergey had been refused to put his arm in Chisora's gloves. Then Sergey squeezed Chisora gloves, and the gloves had no padding, or maybe little padding. Now it's questionable because it's coming from their point of view. But of course you can question it, how true is it, but let's continue with the next screenshot. Before reading this one about the gloves, Eddie Hearn basically in this what Usyk answered about no padding in Chisora gloves. He said that Eddie Hearn told them that he can use the same gloves as long as they're approved by the British Commission. So he was not denying the gloves, that what type of gloves or the lack of padding in Chisora's gloves. But next, Usyk was saying that beside that, he also noticed that the ropes were too slack, and that he doesn't usually lean on them. He doesn't test them usually before his fights when he walks in the ring, but he did it, and he also saw that. So that's just another proof that he was that he's very aware that Eddie Hearn doesn't want him to win, and that like we said on the previous shows, he was not signed by Hearn for his talent only, but also because he's a big threat to Anthony Joshua and to his belts. So Eddie wants to keep it under control. And Box in the chat room is saying that Hearn even said he wanted Chisora to win, or that he said it publicly, which doesn't surprise me, because we all remember of how sad they were after Usyk sparking his best friend in Belly Out, and man, was it enjoyable.
Official Usyk indicated what his third-party contractual status is with Matchroom. How many fights left, or is it a fight-by-fight basis?
Well, I'll get to it later, because it's one of the screenshots that I have prepared, although it's much more about his problems with K2. But he hasn't indicated how many fights or time left. on his contract with Matchroom he has, but he talked about his contract with K2. To simply answer your question, he wasn't saying anything about the length of contract between him and Matchroom. No, but yeah, like you said, like we said on the show before, Usyk to notice that the ring was quite small, and then he went on to say that that before the fight, he or somebody from his team texted Eddie Hearn, telling him about the size of the ring while he was in the dressing room, and Eddie Hearn told him, supposedly answer him via text, that the ring was the same as the one he found himself in the Bellew fight, which couldn't be further from the truth. And then Usyk also said that he thought at the beginning, watching the fights from his dressing rooms, that it may be the TV cameras distorting, and making the ring look smaller. But once he got in the ring, he saw that it was not the case, and he kind of said what he said. He said something along the lines of, well, I saw that the ring was a bit smaller than the one in the Bellew fight, and not just by a bit, but really smaller. So yeah, well,
I mean, they fucked. I mean, we know the official from experience that look at the incident with Dillian White and Oscar Rivas. Arbitrarily changing the gloves on the day of the fight without consent or even advising either the manager, the chief or chief second of the opposite corner, and then not allowing the corner to inspect the gloves after the fight. Both the British Boxing Board of Control and the fighter and his trainer being a hindrance in Oscar Rivas's people from their right to observe and inspect the gloves. It was absolutely ridiculous. And then Dillian Rand goes on this ridiculous rampage. You notice how they always use one bit of controversy to deflect another. The same thing Tyson Fury did to try and get away from that incident and then start focusing on the drugs test that happened after the fight. But they completely deflect the issue about the massive injustice and the legal actions in using unregistered gloves.
Exactly. Yeah, deflect one thing by bringing up the other.
Yeah, it's just that's how the propaganda machine has worked in war, etc.
For sure.
Crazy.
Yeah, so the interviewer here is asking him about who should be protecting his interest, because at the beginning, Usyk, at the beginning of this interview, was very, he didn't want to blame anyone, and he was taking it on the chin, like in the beginning when the interviewer was repeatedly telling him that somebody should protect his interest with gloves, with the ring, how everything is tilted, how the table is tilted against him. He was like, yeah, but I want to fight. But then when the interviewer, who did a great job of in this interview with Usyk, he kept on pressing him. Usyk started opening up, and as you can see here, he thinks Oleksandr Usyk. I don't know if that's another guy from the K2 promotions, but he's saying Oleksandr Usyk should be dealing with these issues, and somebody from his team. So yeah, as you can see, there are things that he doesn't like, that he sees that some of the people who should be working for him are not really doing so, and are working against his interest. And he here in the next screenshot, he's talking about how the mentality of some of those people supposedly working for him was like, let's not argue, and trying to be good with, trying to be liked, and trying to to just go on, and not try to disturb the show. Usyk basically saying that they prefer to let the fight play out, and then later bring up what went wrong, with which Usyk clearly doesn't like, and rightfully so. Let's go to the next one.
I just hope that they can enforce the WBO mandatory position before a unification with Fury. But under the rules, it may be that an undisputed takes precedence even over a WBO Super Championship status. I'm going to have to go back and look at the rules. So Usyk might even still be screwed out a little bit longer, official. I just hope he doesn't take any step aside money, ignore all of that bollocks. But then again, if Fury theoretically beats Joshua, they're going to have a rematch, aren't they? Both of them are going to have rematch clauses, given the magnitude of that fight. And I don't think that WBO is going to capitulate. They're going to allow that because their sanctioning fee is obviously correlated on how much money a fight generates. That's basic economics. So they're going to give their consent to a rematch, and they're not going to enforce the rules. So we may even have a trilogy in that fight. So a very precarious position. Looking at all of the permutations, I would try and enforce the WBO to call the mandatory, actually order the fight straight after the Kubrat Pulev. I'm not sure how much time Joshua's going to have, but after whoever wins that fight, they should be fighting Oleksandr Usyk before Tyson Fury.
Absolutely.
Fury,
Absolutely. Usyk. Sorry, go on.
No.
No, I was just saying, I was confirming what you're saying, because it's absolutely true. He's already been waiting for it. He said that he doesn't want any other fight, that he wants to go straight into it. And yeah, completely agree with you. They will just drag it, and imagine if and when Fury wins that fight, it would just take even longer for him to get the shot. So yeah, and back to the
I do not want either Joshua or Fury to vacate their titles and Usyk fight for a vacant belt, because that's not the sort of fighter he is, and he doesn't want that as well. He wants to fight both of them, and they should fight him. I don't want somebody's Adrian Bronish shit fighting for a vacant title, because Usyk is a great, so I don't want any of that nonsense. I want them to fight him.
Well, you'll see later. Well, what he said about it. Yeah, he kind of, but anyways, I'll show you later. But to answer to you shortly, he says he doesn't care. He doesn't want to wait for it. If they want to fight, he has no problem with it, but it's gonna be without that belt, because he wants that belt. But he also says he absolutely wants to fight for the undisputed, and he's right. He's even right to not to allow them to fight for that belt. without going through him first, because once he gets that belt, it would be even easier for him to, at least a bit easier to get the fight for the other belts that he'll need. Shout out to a new viewer in the chat room, Jack. He's saying British Boxing Board of Control occult corrupt. Yeah, and back to the interview. Yeah, so Usyk was still talking here. He was still talking about people from his side, some of the people from his side not protecting his interests, and he was comparing their actions, or the lack of, by trying to be nice with everybody, and instead of bringing up the problems before the fight, they tend to, to just shut up and eventually talk with him about it after the fight. And so he was comparing it with what should be doing, like what Tyson Fury did against Klitschko. You remember very well that fight in Germany, because Fury, while being a clear B-side versus Klitschko, when he saw those maths, ring math, that was so I don't know, as if they were not fighting, they would not fight in the ring, but on a bad matlas. He threatened not to fight if they don't change it, and with the tickets being sold already being sold for Klitschko versus Fury, they had no other choice but to obligate and to change the mats in the ring for the fight. And that's how the fight went on. And that's something, by the way, that Klitschko was doing to all of his opponents, but no one was arguing. No one from his opponents, previous opponents, promoters, etc., were not talking about it. They were allowing them to fight Klitschko on those fat mats. So, and that's what Usyk was mentioning, as if saying that Fury did a great thing, that he was right doing so. Yeah, so here still he's saying what we do is usually, meaning some of his guys, making everything happen and telling afterwards, or waiting till the next time to change the situation. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, now he was also talking about the dirty tactics Chisora was allowed to employ in the ring, and also his injuries. But it's questionable, because like you and me, we were already talking about after this fight between Usyk and Chisora took place, and it was, I'm still sharing your opinion, that Usyk didn't want to show all of his cards to Anthony Joshua, without no doubt. But when questioned by the interviewer, because the interviewer was saying that he wasn't seeing as much movement from him in the ring, as much activity. So Usyk here is answering that that he hurt the left hand in the first or the second round, and he had the problem with his elbow of the right arm throughout the fight. So it may be a mixture of both, but I would still not exclude that. To me, clearly, Usyk was just trying to do enough, that he was not really looking to have his best performance of his career, because I do agree with you, he doesn't want to show all of his cards. Let me share the next one.
Official, even if Usyk is 100% truthful and he was carrying those injuries, if it was within his will, he decided he would have knocked out Derek Chisora. If hypothetically, if that fight was for the undisputed championship, would Derek Chisora have made it to the end of the 12th round? For me, absolutely no way. Usyk would have knocked him out.
Yeah, I do agree with it. Yeah, if he wanted to push for a knockout, it would have happened because he had him stunned a couple of times, not only once but a few times, 4 or 5 times, where Chisora, despite being much bigger than him, he was stunned and backing away and losing his balance. Losing his feet, and Usyk was just backing away after hurting him instead of jumping right back on him. Of course, it may be the case of him just being cautious, being that he's in the ring with a bigger guy, but even despite that, I saw that there were occasions for him to stop Chisora, but he just didn't do it. For the reasons that you already gave us, that I do share with you. By the way, give me just 5 seconds and I'll be back to talk about the other screenshots.
All right. Just before that, I want to talk a little bit about a fight which happened on Friday night. Unfortunately, I had to go back and watch the fight against really my will and proclivity. But Billy Joe Saunders was defending the WBO 168-pound championship against veteran Martin Murray, attempting to win a world championship for the 5th time. It's been unfortunate, and that's well documented. But what I will say is that Billy Joe Saunders looked absolutely horrible. He'd come down from what I think was 210 pounds, and it clearly showed in the ring. He ran out of energy very early in the fight, up against an opponent who, when an opponent is literally on the brink of retiring because they simply cannot pull the trigger. And Murray's punch output was the lowest it's ever been. Hence, shouldn't have posed much difficulties for Billy Joe Saunders. But I don't know what the hell he does. He seems to sort of jump up and down like a kangaroo, wasting his energy, off balance with a lot of shots, leaps in with that uppercut, with that right hook, continually falling off balance. He doesn't really understand how to throw a punch with the knuckle part of his, which is the only portion of the hand that should be, inflicting a blow. Everything else is not within the rules of boxing. It was a very difficult watch for me, but I thought Billy Joe Saunders was absolutely garbage in the fight. I don't know what the hell all these people are talking about, the promoters and the television networks and boxing channels here on YouTube. The degradation of all of his... Let me rephrase. Billy Joe Saunders may have had a degree of natural talent. He'd won the Commonwealth Championships in the amateurs, so one of the youngest British Olympians as well. So the natural talent was there, but the skills process in terms of the accumulation of skills through education, through sparring, testing your skills in the gym, there's been hardly any acquisition of sort of improving your punch technique, improving your balance, improving your footwork, trying to come around the target. It is a Trojan horse. To me, it was just that is a fighter who simply uses a training camp to lose 40, 50 pounds. Billy Joe has indicated many times that he's not in love with boxing. He doesn't respect the game. Why on earth do boxing fans keep reminiscing to a performance against David Lemieux in terms of judging him and going forward at 168 pounds? It's just extraordinary. Lemieux, a murderous puncher, single-handed in terms of what he can do, but Lemieux has been beaten and knocked out before Billy Joe fought him. So, what the fuck are all these people like stroking their cocks for on that performance?
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know, official. For me, it was just a horrible performance. I don't know what the hell. I didn't see no technical proficiency. I didn't see any footwork. I saw him just stamping, just sort of jumping up and down vertically. Like the way my daughter plays hopscotch, or the way, if you're training in the gym, you're on a jump rope. You're just jumping up and down on the spot. That's all he does. I don't know whether he's stamping, rodents underneath his foot that have just crept up under the canvas, or what. It's horrible, and I've got no proclivity in watching Billy Joe going forward. Whoever he fights, I simply don't care. That's the reason why Frank Warren had enough of him. He did everything to protect him. He delayed fights when Billy Joe was going to lose the belt on the scale. Frank did, but how did Billy Joe reciprocate? He didn't take on challenges, ill discipline, so many immature incidents out of the ring with cocaine and prostitutes and whatever else. Doesn't know how to conduct himself. Look at the way he brings up his son as well, and the incidents they causing, kicking fighters in the testicles, etc. That's some subservient low-level scum.
Yeah.
Get it, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, look, Billy Joe Saunders and his footwork, you can't. The thing that describes his footwork the best is a sumo wrestler. Like when they squat and they just move the left foot, then the right foot, left, right. The same footwork that Billy Joe uses, and that fight against Lemieux, I mean, he did well in a sense that he was there against a fighter who needs to set his feet to punch. So the way, definitely, Saunders was outboxing him and doing the right thing, but it was not that difficult, And by the way, there are other fighters who were able to put a real clinic on Lemieux.
John Ryder was desperate for the fight, and he was willing to take less money than Martin Murray to fight a rematch, which I think is warranted, because the first fight was very close when Billy Joe was with Queensberry Promotions, and John Ryder, after an excellent performance against Callum Smith, was he not a far more viable opponent who deserved a rematch? And clearly he looks a much better fighter at 168 than he does at 160 pounds. That would have been but we know what was going to happen in that fight. I think John Ryder would have just beaten him up, walked him down and just beaten him up. So Saunders went back to fight. Martin Murray had a reasonably good career. I mean, he was the complete opposite of Saunders in terms of not ducking challenges. He fought Golovkin in Monte Carlo. He traveled to Germany to fight Felix Sturm, etc. He's fought George Groves. He's a very good pro. Self-admittedly, he doesn't have the boxing skills at that sort of higher echelon to win a world title. Although he was cruelly denied in Argentina and in Germany. Germany was a little bit closer, but Argentina, I felt, was more comfortable. So when you don't have that name, very difficult to get a decision. So a good pro, but in this fight, he couldn't he couldn't pull the trigger, because that's what happens, once you effectively reach the end of your career. It's a common characteristic pretty much with every fighter. You get that reticence. Your body is not, the communication between your brain and your muscles, and the electrical signals it sends, your body doesn't respond in that same way. It's just what happens to humans. It's the evolution. It's the retirement process. And Murray, probably better for him that he does retire. I hope he's made enough money. It sounds like he's got a good family. You've got your faculties there as well. And credit to him, official, because he was incarcerated very early on as well. So with Oliver Harrison, his trainer, they changed his life, learned discipline, became a professional boxer. You don't hear about him in terms of any sort of lapses outside the ring. So that's the one positive story we can say, what boxing has actually changed his life. And he's made a bit of money. He's never won a world title, but he's done well, showed great endurance in a lot of the fights, had a very good chin as well. His trainer Oliver sadly passed away as well, so it's been hard on him from a mental capacity, as we were indicating with Yarde as well. So whatever he decides to do, good on him. I mean, excellent fighter, great character. Whatever he decides to do, I think retirement probably would be better now. He's not gonna win the world title, I don't think so.
Yeah, I do agree with you. He was hell of a tough fighter, man.
Oh, yeah, man.
And credit to him.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're taking all that punishment from Prime Golovkin, and from what I remember, he never touched the canvas. It was the referee, he stopped it because he shelled up against Golovkin, etc. So damn, that's a tough fighter, man.
Yeah,
Credit.
it's a difficult proposition, because he is a cagey fighter, and had he opened up against Golovkin, which Golovkin would have wanted, he probably would have been stopped around 6, 7, 8, something like that.
Yeah, that's also true.
Yeah. You got a wise man knows his limitations. He's just got to try and shell up, try and pot shot a little bit from the outside. Difficult fight for him, but at least he showed his durability and his endurance. He didn't take a dive like a lot of these faggots.
That's true. Absolutely. By the way, sorry, I was eating something. Yeah, shout out to Aldog. I gave you a shout out earlier because thanks to you, Aldog, we are able to talk about this interview now. And by the way, Overhand in the chat room, shout out to him, saying that Bektemir Melikuziev wants Ryder now. Yeah, that would be a great fight, man. But yeah, back to the interview. Sorry, just. Yeah, as you can see on the screen, so the interview is asking him about, why should...
To overhang.
Yeah.
Forget about John Ryder. Feed Billy Joe Saunders to Bektemir Melikuziev. Let him
Yeah.
Saunders. That's what I'd like to see, but sorry, carry on.
No problem. Yeah, and I do agree with you, man. He would give Saunders such a beating that he deserves for I mean, for slacking for years and doing nothing and calling out fighters, but still ducking them. Yeah, it would be a proper beating that many boxing fans would enjoy. But yeah, as Usyk was talking to the interviewer, I guess, about his problems with K2 promotions. The interviewer, so he's asking him, judging by what happened in the Chisora fight, the gloves, etc., and how Eddie Hearn, he's always tilting the table against him. He's asking him, maybe you don't need to leave your current promoter, meaning talking about K2, as England is not interested in you, in the sense that, well, what's happening with him fighting on the Hearn cards, despite him being signed to Hearn. So yeah, as you can see, he's very aware of all those fuckeries. Yeah, and so the interviewer is saying you're not expected in there. They're not interested in you to win because you don't bring as much money as Joshua yet. Of course, everybody knows it. Let's go to the next one. And he's saying, although our promoters don't fight for your interest either. Let me go on. By the way, feel free to jump in to talk about those screenshots anytime you want to say something, anything catches your eye.
I wasn't aware of any friction between Usyk and K2.
Oh yeah,
I sensed a little bit of disharmony, but I didn't realize Usyk had made it explicit insinuations in social media or against him directly. So that's interesting.
I haven't neither. So it looks like he just opened up in this very interview. So that's why I found it extremely interesting.
I think we need the coup d'etat of boxing promotions and our first sign.
Absolutely. Our main guy Usyk, definitely. He's first on our list.
Yeah,
Usyk,
our Leonard Blavotnik is going to be Lord Rama the 10th. He's got all the money in the world.
So all you fighters, or you good fighters who do not fuck around, come to the coup d'etat of boxing promotions, the coup d'etat of boxing imperium, and get what you really deserve, because we don't fuck around neither. Yeah, so still Damto speaking about his promoters and the problems he has with them, adding to what the interviewer asked him about what's happening with him on Hearn's cards, and he says maybe something will change, maybe not, because I'm the promoter myself, and that's the part of the reason that he started his own promotion. I forget the name of his own promotional company, but it's look like, but by what he's saying here in the interview, is that it seems like he started his company exactly because K2 Promotions is not protecting his interests, and Eddie Hearn neither. Yeah, so the interesting part, the interviewer is asking him, as far as I understand, K2 disagrees with with the length of the contract that Usyk has with them, how many more fights or how much time there is left on that contract. Let's see it. So yeah, he's about to talk about how much time left on the contract is there. Yeah, I haven't seen the contract. Yeah, so that's what the interview is saying. But he's saying November the 9th, which just passed. It was a month ago. Is the date when the contract expires. You both shake your hands and that's it. And
What was that date again?
November the 9th, so it was a month ago that his contract with K2 expired by what Usyk is saying. But obviously K2 Promotions disagrees with it. Let's see it. Yeah, so they're claiming K2 Promotions is claiming that it's not that their contract with Usyk is not about the time left, the time when it expires, but it's structured by fights, and that they have more fights left, and Usyk disagrees with it. And so the interviewer now is asking him about, Vladimir Vladimirovich, it's Vladimir Klitschko, and that Usyk and Vlad had discussions, and he told Vladimir that he doesn't want to extend the contract. So let's go. Yeah, go on.
No. Interesting.
Okay. Yeah, so Usyk is
They're
answering.
disagreeing that he's a free agent.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, in this interview, he's saying that he hasn't announced it yet to the U.S. and British media. But yeah, the way it looks, he's going to leave K2 Promotions, and he's gonna see if he's even going to sign to Matchroom or someone else, or is he going to keep it just
Go into
Matchroom
Matchroom. Worse.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm thinking, and that's what the interviewer was telling him earlier. And yeah, so as far as the reasons go for him leaving K2, he says everything is simple. I want to move forward, like what. And so the interviewer asking him, why can't you move forward with K2? Why do you have to leave them? Why can't you stay with them and prolong the contract? And let's see what he's saying. The platitudes about him wanting to work on his development, but that's not a screenshot that I really wanted to show. It's probably the following one. What I want is to get favorable conditions for myself, because every athlete has a certain period of his time in his possession. But that's still not the screenshot. Probably the next one. Hold on.
See, the problem is officially with a contract now. Everybody says seen or sign a contract. I mean, I've worked with contracts also in boxing as well, for a law firm that I did some work back at Canary Wharf in the 90s, and they had a number of fighters that they were working with. It was Adam Solicitors. I was doing some compliance work for, and so I've seen boxing contracts the way they're structured, but it's so hard to speculate unless you've seen it. And I understand the terminology because I worked on terms and conditions, but a lot of these contracts are third-party assignable. Sometimes the redemption period, the date, is not always. It's not always an exit clause from a contract. These are some of the most powerful. What do they say? The pen is mightier than the sword, and these contracts can be structured in such a highly convoluted way, and a lot of the boxers don't understand it because boxing is from the streets, and whether they have whether they've used viable attorneys to sort of interpret and explain to them exactly what are they conceding, what rights do they have, rights to their own fights. It's just it is real. It's a minefield sometimes, and the way it's drafted is very, very, very complex, documents. So, but the Usyk is not a stupid man. He's going to have he's going to have the attorneys who can make a ruling straight away whether the contract is over. That shouldn't be too hard for them to decide. So I can't see why K2 is fighting it. If Usyk is confident that it has expired, then that's the position I'll take. Unless K2 share a copy of the contract, which sometimes Twitter or social media they'll have the page and they can corroborate what they're saying. So.
Yes, exactly. Because let's say most of the boxers are not really educated when it comes to the contracts. They're coming from the street, and so they don't know how to read it and what do they mean. And it's different than, let's say, NBA, NFL, or any other sport that is. Because in boxing everyone is going for his own, while at least though in those big team sports, you have the in some way the whole organizations behind you protecting your interests, because you're playing for a team, so you would be more protected. Although even those athletes from the other sport are often as uneducated on the contracts, but at least the sport itself is way better regulated than the boxing is. So that's why boxers very often end up terrible. And by the way, Usyk, I mean, it doesn't have to mean that he knows contracts, but he's not a stupid man for real, because he already has multiple masters and degrees in, I do not remember what.
Yeah,
but yeah,
this contract would have had to have been the draft, and the executed or the unexecuted, whatever it is, would have been drafted in the Ukraine when he turned professional. So the contract is probably not even in English.
Yeah, a good point, because see, you haven't even seen this interview, and in this interview, Usyk was mentioning that his contract started in 2013, so it was a 7-year contract. So was it? Well, yeah, it was even before he became a pro, and right, because he became pro much later, isn't it? I think so.
He turned over straight after 2012, after
Maybe. Okay.
World Series of Boxing.
Okay.
Professional, yeah.
Okay. So I'm wrong about it. Okay, but yeah. Anyways, it was the contract itself started in 2013. But yeah, so let's go back to the interview. So the interviewer again telling him that his own feeling is that he's not doing well with Krasuk anymore, and could he tell why? So yeah, this is the part I wanted to show you. And here, Usyk is straight up answering when something happens, like the situation with the ring, gloves, etc. He's expected to fight for my interest, and not trying to be good with. Sorry. Let's see the next one.
I don't know, official. It's hard to attach too much blame to K2 promotions. Just looking at it from a simple perspective, what have they done wrong in terms of guiding his career thus far? He surpassed Evander Holyfield, so he's a world record holder there. He's the first four-belt undisputed cruiserweight champion, another world record holder there.
But I don't. Sorry. But I don't know corruption. I'm not sure. I think I would disagree with you on this one because, look, for sure, I mean, I agree. They gave him the opportunities, and Usyk, he took on those opportunities and made something, became successful, no doubt about it. But as far look, even you and me, we were saying for the past few shows, we were complaining about how he was being treated, and finally, and you were saying in the last show you're hoping that Usyk is aware of it, and now judging by this interview, he's very well aware of it. So he's saying that that he's not okay with his people not protecting his interests, as if just like in the previous fight. So I'm
all
fully on his side.
Official, all of this deliberation and underhand tactics is all from his third-party promoter. Correct me if I'm wrong. Matchroom were the one who were instigating everything for his demise, in my opinion. All of the roadblocks and all of these situations regarding not enforcing an A-sider fight, the privileges that they're entitled to, but conceding them all to Chisora because they clearly wanted the draw or Chisora to win. So I think Usyk is angry that K2 maybe were a little bit too passive and they didn't anticipate this and they didn't try and I'm not sure about that, but that's going to be a very difficult one to adjudicate on.
Exactly, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, it's his third-party promoter. It's Matchroom, Eddie Hearn, that's tilting the table against him. But again, he's in this interview, he's expressing his he's saying that he doesn't like the fact that the K2 promotion is not doing anything about it, and he was bringing up examples of Tyson Fury, and his team standing up for Fury in Germany against Klitschko. That they should have. His complaint is basically that they just go along with all the fuckeries from Hearn. So that's his complaining. The
question is here is did Usyk relay his skepticism regarding this fight immediately to K2, and did they just sit and do absolutely fuck all on it, or did they try and remonstrate with Eddie Hearn? I think that's the perennial question here. If they did nothing, then he has a point. But if nobody had prognosticated what was going to happen beforehand, then it's a bit difficult. So that's the $1 million question here. Did they have sufficient time to address his concerns directly to Eddie Hearn and say, what the fuck are you doing, man? He's the A-side of fight. Why are you giving him such a small ring? What's wrong with these ropes? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, who the fuck are these judges and the referee? Why are they giving the fight 1-1-4, 1-1-3 when he won it easy? You're trying to fuck him over. So that's the sort of conversation, Did he relay these points, or did he anticipate that K2 would have picked up on them and voiced them directly to Eddie Hearn? So it's a really hard one. We don't really know all of the facts, all of the conversation between all the parties.
For sure, yeah, that's true. But I don't know. At least judging by this interview, as long as at least in my personal opinion,
yeah,
long as what he's saying is true and he's not lying, I completely agree with him. Because in this very interview, what I'm trying to say here in this very interview, he's complaining just about that, exactly about that point about K2 promotions trying to be good with and be liked by Hearn, by the other promoters, etc. So at least judging by this interview, I'm completely on his side.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure, we don't know everything that happened, but yeah, but
they are a passive sort of promotional outfit. You never really hear Vladimir or even Vitaly talk about K2 promotions.
yeah,
You don't really see them ringside. They don't have a massive stable of international fighters, so it's a very sort of not really ubiquitous type of boxing organization. With the market they have, they could have had so many. They could have really been a mainstream boxing organization, but with Vitaly's political aspirations now quite difficult. So who manages the operation? Vlad and that may just have the overall control, but I'm sure it's all been delegated to other people who manage the company. So it's cloak and daggers. Don't really know too much about it.
You know what? That's an interesting question in itself, because yeah, first of all, you're completely right. They're not showing up, not doing anything in the media for K2 promotions, except for being ringside for their events. But beside that, they're not doing anything. But again, I do remember. I kind of remember, but don't remember exactly. I do think that the way K2 functions is kinda like how Golden Boy functions, meaning that there are Klitschko brothers like Oscar, and then I don't know if it's this guy Oleksandr Krasiuk, who's kind of like B-Hop, meaning that he has his share in a company, and he has his fighters that he manages. So it's kind of not really easy to understand how do they function, but at the same time, yeah, in this interview they're talking about Usyk having the negotiations with Klitschko brothers. So
yeah, because they don't have from my understanding, they don't have a direct sort of autonomous deal with any specific network. So whether it's autonomous funding coming in from the Klitschkos, or that's why they're using the third party as a leverage internationally. So then, therefore, whoever has the rights for their overseas fights can obviously then pay the fighters directly, so the Klitschkos don't have to. So kind of it's like an LLC, typical sort of business model. Try and sort of mitigate that credit risk or the financial risk. That's the way boxing promoters tend to structure their companies. So, and the Klitschkos are sharp; they know what they're doing. So, but we'll do anything else official? I think we're spending a little bit too much time on this one.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's end it. The very last point is, as you can see in screenshot, yeah, I forgot to bring it up. His other complaint, he just mentioned it as one of his complaints about K2 promotions, is that his fight against Marco Huck was supposed to happen in Ukraine. And so the interviewer was telling him, but he was thinking that K2 was probably right about setting that fight in Germany, being that it would make more money from from the tickets sold. And so Usyk went on to ask him how much does he think that the ringside seats costed in Germany, and he gave some kind of big numbers over 1,000 or a couple of thousand euros per seat ringside. And Usyk told him, well, you see, you're wrong, because the ringside seats in Germany for the Hook fight were only 40, not more than 400, 500 euros, and that it could be easily sold in Ukraine as well. And he was mentioning the various BMW and Mercedes cars that you can see on the Ukrainian streets even before you see them on the German streets. So that was another of his complaints. But yeah, so that's all about this interview. Once again, thanks to L-Dog for the link. Yeah, so I guess we can go on. You know what? Well, we are definitely going to talk about Errol Spence versus Danny Garcia now. But I'm wondering if you have time for the breakdown of Emmanuel Rodriguez. But we'll see it. Okay, so have you seen the fight?
No, not in its entirety, but I've seen certain elements of the fight to try and gauge an overall perspective, and did a little bit of slow motion analysis. But I'll give my high level synopsis after you. I mean, you've been watching the fight.
Okay, so I think I'll try to keep it short because I rewatched the fight just before the show tonight, but just like the first time, I was not really scoring it, really trying to score it, even rewatching it earlier. But I do think that, well, I disagree with most of the people I saw tweeting about this fight, because you would be surprised. I mean, I don't even know how you saw this fight, but I think it was extremely close. So, being that I was not scoring it, I would say maybe Spence outworked him, maybe 7-5. But at the same time, trust me, the way I saw this fight without scoring it, but watching it twice, both times I thought that I would not complain if anyone had Danny Garcia winning, believe it or not. And this is the moment where everybody stops listening to the show, because they completely disagree with me. They're probably saying, what the fuck is he talking about? But yeah, Danny Garcia, throughout the fight, he was landing way more cleaner and way harder shots to the body and upstairs. Now, of course, Spence himself, he was landing very good punches and was more active. But I would say Danny was even, for the most part, I'm not saying that his work rate was anywhere near insane, because it's never the case with Danny Garcia, but his work rate was higher and than usual, and he was not as lethargic as in all of his previous fights, except for Lucas Matisse, which happened 7 years ago. So, in my opinion, it was what surprised me the most about this fight was Danny's performance, and I was saying, man, what a shame that he just doesn't like to work hard either in his training camp, but certainly in his fights, because throughout his whole career, he's half-assing that. I forgot how good he can be. I really enjoyed this performance from him. Now, yeah, people are saying that Spence's performance was amazing, that he shut him out 10 rounds to 2, 9 rounds to 3. Now I don't even know how you saw this fight. You may disagree with me as well, but I saw an extremely close fight, and I'll get into Spence's performance in a second, but I just want to say that Garcia, yeah, his work rate was not insane, but was better than usual, and strategically he surprised me strategically, because strategically I think that he performed extremely well. For his limitations, he had a great game plan, doubling up on the right hands, up and down, and not telegraphing them. And beside the whole PBC Fox, doesn't matter which team that televises PBC fights, as always they were sucking on Errol Spence so hard. I would not be surprised if in 9 months Spence's children start coming out of their mouth. So yeah, but Garcia, he was doing very well. It was just terrible to me that they were not calling his punches, and he was landing better punches throughout the whole fight. Now, yeah, Spence was probably outworking him and outspeeding him for sure. He's quicker, has quicker feet, and he was landing very good punches himself. And I can't wait to do a breakdown of this fight for the future shows, because I didn't have enough of time to really get deep into it. But I saw a lot of interesting things. Now about Spence's performance. As always, he was being aggressive, unlike in the Mikey Garcia fight. Where against Mikey he was as active as he was against Danny, but I don't know, he was extremely active against Mikey Garcia, but kind of boxing at the same time off the back foot, trying to counter Mikey while getting out of range, things like that, while against Danny, while he was still boxing in and out, he was more front foot heavy. And yeah, people are asking why Danny Garcia was not able to land as many or any left hooks on Errol Spence. Well, first of all, he did land some of them that were very short, and that, judging by how most of the people scored this card, which shows me that they have no eyes, probably they didn't see Danny Garcia's left hooks, some of short left hooks that he was landing against Spence. For the same reason they scored the fight wrong, because they're blind. But yeah, the truth is he wasn't landing many of his left hooks, mainly because Errol Spence was boxing in and out, and yeah, he was getting hit to the body by the left hook, to the body, by the way, of times. And Errol Spence is good fighting in and out, stepping out of range immediately after finishing his attacks or combos. And plus he's longer, and plus to land upstairs on him while he's taller than Danny, sorry. And having a tie guard, it wasn't easy. And plus, on top of that, I saw Danny Garcia trying to set up his left hook against him, like he always does. And it means the way he sets up that, what people are calling no-look left hook, is by feinting a right hand, and he steps in with his right foot while he feints a right hand, and bring his right shoulder over his front lead knee, over his left knee, and from there his left hand is cocked. But Danny was being cautious, because he saw that Spence was paying attention to that move, and he was waiting for him to get in that position, so Errol can counter him with a straight left, and that's why a couple of times he had to back up. But enough talk about the left hook, because that right hand was fantastic weapon for Danny Garcia, in my opinion. He was landing it a lot, really a lot of punches, and it's really shameful, terrible that no one out of boxing aficionados from Twitter or the TV commentary crew, they didn't call two of those punches while he was constantly landing them. I'm not saying that Spence was not probably outworking him, but he was, to me, clearly landing those right hands, looping right hands, doubling on them up and down, switching from straight rights to looping rights, overhand rights, right uppercuts. That was great. And another thing for why his left hook was not landing a lot is because he was not really looking to land the left hook, because you can say against the southpaw, left hook is a good weapon, but in this case, judging by their styles, it was not easy for him because of the way he sets it up, how he cocks his left shoulder back, and what I was about to say. Oh, I lost my train of thoughts, but. What Danny was doing with his right hand, first of all, instead of countering Spence's southpaw left hand with his orthodox left hook, he was rather countering Spence coming in behind jabs and doubling up on his jabs before throwing his left hand. So while Spence would step in the range with his jab, that's when that's the punch that Danny was looking to counter, and he had a lot of success with. Like I said, doubling up, etc. He landed numerous great body shots, and kudos to Spence for taking them, because for Spence, what I got from this fight, the biggest news is that he's completely all right after his car accident, and that he's in a very good shape, and that he probably came in lighter than ever, so trying to be in a great shape. It looks like he's taking boxing more seriously, and plus judging by his size, he needs to be, if he wants to stay in this division. So what else I wanted to say? Another thing, and you have to keep this in mind when you talk about the possible Errol Spence versus Crawford fight. I'm not saying who is going to win. I have my opinions how that fight would go, but the thing is, many people are jumping from back and forth from one guy to the other, switching, being very hesitant in between Crawford and Spence. But I'm just really shocked of how many people thought this was amazing performance from Spence, because it showed me, well, what he does well. It was nothing new to me. I already knew it before this fight, but this just proved to me some of his faults that I thought I've seen before, and those are Danny Garcia pivoting, timing, also Spence's jab, Spence stepping in with his jab in the pocket by either sticking out his own jab and sticking it there and pivoting on his left foot outside of Spence's right jab, or doubling up on the jab while pivoting. And even, he was what Garcia was also doing, he was moving laterally to his right, and when he was waiting for Spence again to jump in behind the jab, and the moment he jumps in, he would pivot again on that left foot and throw double jabs or left hook to the body. And that's also how you can set a right hand by that pivot, you know. When Spence is stepping in behind his jab, you just jab or double jab on that pivot, and then he's open for your straight right. Then yeah, go on.
Was you surprised upon learning that the volume of punches thrown by both fighters was comparable? Now we know CompuBox is not an all definitive system and that it is calibrated for the A-side fighter. A lot of people that are just using CompuBox as their justification are being a little bit hypocritical, given that they've criticized CompuBox in the past for Floyd Mayweather fights, etc. So, from you watching the fight in its entirety, could you sense that the punch numbers were comparable, or do you think there is some sort of a misrepresentation?
Well, look, that's an interesting question that I was asking myself watching this fight both times live and rewatching it earlier, because again, I saw Danny Garcia being more active than usual, and yeah, you know what, I would say definitely Spence had a higher work rate, but it was not insanely higher, because I think that people still have Danny's performances from his previous fights where he was even lazier. I think that he was, like I said, I think he was much more active than he usually is. But yeah, I would say that Spence probably outlanded him. Maybe even by around 100 punches, I don't know, but Danny was not, all I'm saying, that Danny was not as inactive as he was as he normally is. So yeah, but I get your point. Yeah, I do agree. This could be another proof, another example of CompuBox being fake. And by the way, yeah, even on Twitter, some of the guys that works in CompuBox, he blocked me because I started exposing, making jokes about him and exposing their hypocrisy.
For me to make that determination is impossible at this stage because I haven't seen the entire fight. But what I saw was definitely a more viable Danny Garcia, and I'm glad that all of the excess baggage from his previous performances were not on show, because I had low expectations for him, especially after the Ivan Redcatch fight. He's very much almost become like a Ricardo Mayorga now, losing to all of the top champions and making a lot of money in the process, and he's very content in doing so. But in this fight, and maybe he had gauged it, Spence is essentially an attritional fighter. He wins fights by outworking his opponents and breaking them down. He's not a concussive or a thudding puncher, but he's sufficiently heavy-handed enough. Accurate body puncher, hell of a lot of low blows, but he's a very aggressive body puncher. Pressure, he'll come forward, but not always will walk you down. He'll do it in certain increments when he senses you're hurt and he feels he has more endurance than you, then he'll walk you down like he did in this fight as well. So essentially, some sort of a quasi pressure, but definitely an attritional fighter. So theoretically, there's two ways to beat him. Either number one, you outwork him and roll the dice with the scorecards on the PBC, which is very dangerous, or number two, you knock him out or sufficiently hurt him, really debilitate him, in which you then restrict his output. Maybe Danny had gauged that, I don't know, because he definitely threw a lot more punches. There was a lot more venom in his punches, and pro rata sort of pound for pound, Danny, I think, hits just as hard, if not harder than Errol with a single blow, because I saw him hurt Errol 2 or 3 times in the fight. Momentarily, they might have just been, buzzed him up, but definitely the body shots did, and some headshots. But the problem with Danny Garcia may just come down to skill and talent, and this is the problem on defense. Now, Spence has a good guard, high guard, an active guard. He's moving his lead hand, not fencing it in the Ukrainian style, but an up-down motion, sometimes firing a jab from his lead hand being a little bit further out. The problem with Danny Garcia is that he doesn't have a tight, robust guard. Whenever he throws a hook, he'll drop his lead hand. So Errol then can therefore take advantage of that by throwing 1, 2, 3. He'll double and triple up. So he's already got the lead hand position because Danny's hand is already low. And that's the problem. So Danny's face is getting peppered with the jab. The problem with Danny is that because he's anchored on his back foot, because he's a counter puncher, so his defense, what he relies on is, if there's sufficient gap between the two fighters, because he's leaning back on his back foot to try and land a counter right hand. That's where the leverage is coming from the punch. But from a defensive standpoint, how he's going to slip the punches is by leaning back, or even taking a step back if he can do so, not any side-to-side exaggerated upper body movement. And because he doesn't have a tight guard, or he can even use a shoulder roll to try and deflect a jab coming from a south hand, or even he can't obviously block a backhand, but he can block a backhand with his lead hand, which is already cocked. And that's what he was doing sometimes as well. So the problem is if your head is remaining on the line and you're relying on leaning back, slipping, and landing a counter right hand, which he was doing, but the only way he can get his head off the line is if he transfers the weight from his back foot where he's anchored onto his front foot. Then he can get his head and his body off the line. And that's what he didn't do. And that is something he has never done. So that's just Danny Garcia for you. He doesn't have that particular skill to do so. So that is the reason why he was continuously getting peppered with the jab, and his eye was getting marked and bruised up. But what he was doing well with the hand, and somebody was saying he wasn't setting any traps, but he was setting traps against landing the short body shots and then coming over the top with a looping. He was looping the right hand actually very nicely at times, sometimes coming round the guard, sometimes coming over the guard even, and once or twice straight punches straight down the middle as well. So, and he was leaning, he was literally accelerating into the right hand, and you could hear the acoustic thumps where it was deflecting off the glove, or it was landing on the body or landing on the head, and he was snapping Errol's head back as well. So he was definitely landing heavy punches, and he was sitting down on these punches as well. But from a defensive, for that particular deficiency I mentioned, which is a technical problem, that's just his makeup of being, a counter puncher who's not blessed with magnificent footwork, doesn't have that transfer of weight to get the upper body and get his head off the line as well, because he hasn't got any exaggerated head movements. He's not really protecting his chin in that way. So Spence did some great stuff, and what I couldn't understand is why Danny was landing more left hooks to the body, because up against the southpaw who's throwing multiple jabs, and where he doesn't have to even fight to get lead hand control, if he's doubling and quadrupling, then the left hook is a better punch than the straight right hand, because you can actually hook round the active lead hand, which is predominantly been extended out. So he's got no protection. Errol has no protection for the right hand side of his chin. So a left hook and exaggerating the hook, I felt Errol was tailor made for Danny. But in the last show we mentioned that Danny has been throwing that left hook with the same sort of venom and belief as he did early on in his career, and that could be down to a content fighter. I don't know, whatever it is, but we know that Danny's best performances have been like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, a considerable time. And although he showed a magnificent chin, but that's not going to win the battle up against a guy who also has a very good chin, has durability. But he was 14 months out of the ring, so a little bit of ring rust. And we saw Errol was still very skeptical about taking punches or punches that have caused his gum shield to come out, because he's had 6 surgical procedures. So he's probably spent an exorbitant amount of money on the fixtures, his teeth that have been screwed as well. And Danny hits hard, so we don't know what the repercussions are going to be of the blows. Well, Errol didn't know as well. If he's sparring with 16-ounce gloves, I'm sure he may have come down to around, you might have even gone that the 10-ounce just to check what was his punch resistance going to be like. I'm sure he sparred a little bit with Jamel Charlo as he does. And he would have had a litmus test to say whether he can take the punches or not. So that's the reason why they probably went in with Danny. They knew, punch resistance wasn't going to be a problem. It's more mental, psychological, getting off the scars of an accident like that, and 14 months of ring rust, so that the stamina might not have been ideal. He was definitely slowing down, and that is not only due to the long layoff, but it's also due to the body shots that Garcia was inflicting. Very heavy punches, hard punches. He did some great work, really good body work. It was the body work and the straight and the loop right hands, which was definitely Danny's best punches. Some good counter punching as well. So from Danny's perspective, official, if he threw 700 punches for a counter puncher, that's actually very impressive, because he's obviously trying to lead or throw as many punches from initiating the exchanges anyway, which is good. And that's what you've got to do with Errol. If you feel that you don't have the power to knock him out, you're not going to knock him out. No one's really been close to doing so. So you've got to try and,
exactly.
So, but Errol,
go on.
I give him credit. I mean, some of the latter rounds, I saw a little bit of 8th for 9th, and he was starting to walk Danny down and, land some hard blows. And Danny was definitely getting beaten up in some of those rounds. But he was competitive. He came back in the 12th with a little insurrection rally, showed that, maybe the better way is to try and push Errol back a bit. So, I don't know. I thought he was a good effort from Danny Garcia, much better than what I've seen for a number of years from him. He definitely tried to win the fight, try and knock Errol out, land some hard shots, showed good craft, some good ring IQ as well. Very good experience, because he's been up against a lot of these PBC fighters as well. So they've been well matched. Had some good fights with Sean Porter and Keith Thurman as well. Errol, I think, will be better in his next fight as well. I think if the pennies drop for him now, and he's now no longer he's a reformed alcoholic now, good to see. He's paying more attention. He's working more with strength and conditioning. No doubt he's getting his clenbuterol in Texas as well.
Yeah.
That's no doubt about that, because look at the weigh-in, man. his arms were skinny as hell. I couldn't believe what I was actually seeing. Very, very small waist as well he has. His body proportion is quite extraordinary. Yeah, I'm sure he's still gonna need a wonder bra at some stage as well. But yeah, pretty good fight, competitive fight. Spence to me definitely looked to be the victor. I think around the 7-5 for me looked to probably be about a reasonable sort of scorecard, I think.
Okay. Yeah. You know what? By the way, I don't want anyone to think that I'm shitting on Spence. I do think that after all, his performance was very good, and that what gives me confidence in him is that he looked completely intact from the car accident, and that he was as active and in extremely good shape, extremely high pace as always, for most of the times at least. So that's a good thing. But yeah, I have many more points to make about this fight, because it was simply very interesting to me. So I'm saying that his performance was very good, but at the same time, it just reassured me in some of his limitations that I saw. And now back to Danny Garcia. I think that some of the reasons for him not being able to land that left hook was, first of all, he was probably worried about Spence doubling and tripling up on his jab while coming in. So that may be why. And then being that Spence fights in and out and is much longer, much taller than Garcia, and Garcia doesn't have a foot speed to close that gap after throwing that jab when he steps out. I do think it was also one of the reasons that it was difficult for him to land that left hook. But on the other hand, like I said, that's why it was easier with him, with his lead hand being low, to sleep on the inside of the jab and counter that jab that way with the right hand before he throws a right hand. And the way Errol Spence behaves when being targeted by a right hand or multiple right hands was very very interesting to me, because look, okay, what Danny was basically doing, he was waiting for Spence to step in behind jabs and then invest with his to throw a meaningful straight left hand. But before throwing it, he was waiting for him to lean in, and that way he was either countering him upstairs when before Spence goes to Danny's body with straight left, or just before he throws that straight left upstairs. But one thing that was very interesting that I saw was that every time Danny would throw one or multiple right hands, especially upstairs, Spence is backing up in a straight line. Always. There is probably not one exception in this fight, as probably in his other fights. Which, yeah, it's about him. About Errol having his style, and his basic in and out style, high work rate in and out. But every time you throw that straight right hand upstairs, or doesn't matter, right hand upstairs, he's backing up. And many times it is just a shame that Danny Garcia didn't do it enough. But every time, even when he was just feinting a straight right coming forward, Errol Spence was pulling in a straight line. That's how he trapped him on the ropes in the 9th round, I think. just feinting and just throwing a light right hand, multiple right hands, make Spence back up. And so I do think that he's very open, not only because he's a southpaw, but because of the way he reacts to it, the way he's backing up. That right hand may be a problem for him, or maybe even maybe a way to set up some other punches on Spence with that straight right to make him back up. So I want people to have that in mind. Go on.
With Spence, you see what happens because he's got a high guard position. Sometimes he uses he had an elevated shoulder as well, his right shoulder. I think that was as a contingency plan when he's throwing his jabs, that he has protection for his chin against Danny Garcia's potent sort of touted left hook. So that's a good tactic. So when these fighters have got a high guard position, they tend to shell up. And why they do that is because they're not too averse to moving their heads, because they feel they've got sufficient protection behind a high guard, a tight guard, and the shoulder as well. So that's why Errol Spence doesn't really have too much head movement, and he can be hit. And that is the other reason why. Because he's not an adept counterpuncher, that whenever punches are forthcoming at him, that he will just try and his proclivity there is to try and protect his chin in his face. So he will go defensively conscious behind that tight guard, and he won't counterpunch. And that's where Shawn Porter was able to exploit him, because he doesn't have a counter short right hand at that short range that would have been a perfectly deterrent against Shawn, who was getting underneath his punches and charging him. Whereas was able to neutralize Shawn Porter to a certain extent, because he does have a beautiful short counter right hand, and Kell Brook had the same weapon against Shawn Porter as well. But Errol, from that south point, he doesn't have a counter right hand, so that's why that's the other reason why he try and, whenever punches are coming, he'll protect his face. And that's why you've got to throw combinations, official, because you know that he's not going to counter you. He only tries to counter you to the body sometimes very close, because he's pretty good on the inside. But you're not going to see a lot of counter headshots. I haven't seen any. Maybe a couple of counter jabs here and there. But so
that's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah, you've got to open up with 6, 7, 8 punch combinations when he's doing that. When you're seeing him, when he's got his guard up, because that's where you've got opportunities. Then you can target. You can alternate between head and body to try and force him to get his gloves down to protect his body. If his elbows are still protecting the middle area of his chest, which he tends to do, so the elbows are not all the way down, so his body area is always open when he's doing that. But Garcia was at those critical points, he was just looking a little bit too much for headshots. Whereas, I thought some left hooks to the body, left to the liver on one side, and that side to the solar plexus was open. But it's heated the battle, sometimes you get a bit of tunnel vision. It's the elite fighters that have that composure and know exactly where to, the punch placement and the sort of perfect punches. But Garcia is not really elite in that sense. Very good fighter, but not elite. Never has been elite.
Yeah, and I mean, but a simple point about Spence backing up, and yeah, that's true. He's not a natural counterpuncher, and that was one of my other points that I'll make. But at least what I'm saying, at least it's a clear tendency that always happens when he gets right hands being thrown at him upstairs. So at least it could be exploited, maybe not as a fallacy or as something that he doesn't do well, but just as a simple tendency. So just like you said, being that it's a clear tendency for him to back up straight back when having a right hand being thrown at him. So after that, it's up to a fighter, to his opponent, to see which way he can exploit it. And just like you said, that's when you're supposed to open up with combos when you see that nothing is coming back at you.
Official, you are absolutely right. Though he does have a tendency not to defend that right hand well, and Kell Brook was able to land it at will. And another fighter who was catching Errol Spence, pretty low profile fight, but was Chris Van Heerden. If you go and try and extract some images from that, Van Heerden was landing the right, and to me it looked like he temporarily stunned Spence as well. So he's very, very susceptible to that right hand, where it's fired straight or looping around his guard. Does not do a good job on that. And also to the body. If you can mix it to the body and to the head, if Danny had a little bit more of that through, just maybe focused a little bit more on that and not wasting too many of the other punches, then could have been a different fight.
Yeah. And by the way, you know what? Another tendency of his, and this may be even a good thing, but at least that's not or bad, depends on how you look at it. But one thing is sure, I enjoy it, and it's that. How we are talking about Crawford having a dog in him. Well, I would say that especially after this fight, that Errol Spence has at least almost as much dog in him as Crawford, because every time he gets caught with a great punch, and many times, every time, in fact, when he got caught by a great punch from Danny Garcia, he was immediately jumping in with combos, immediately looking to retaliate. So that's another interesting thing. I do enjoy it for sure. As a boxing fan, I love that those type of fighters. That's why that's what I especially liked about Pacquiao, many of them. But yeah, I do enjoy it now. It could be exploited probably but I do enjoy it. And by the way, yeah, just like you said, he's not a natural counter puncher. I mean, I saw him setting some traps for counter punches and countering Mikey, but it was Mikey, stationary Mikey, on his way out of pocket. But naturally, he's not a counter puncher, man, and that's why. Look, I have to say a couple of words. I know we've been already talking about this fight in between him and Crawford, but stylistically, where I would favor Crawford, beside the things that I already mentioned, is that he's not a counter puncher, and that's, in my opinion, it means that it would give him less chance to counter Crawford, although he comes in behind the high guard, while and there's always a possibility of stunning and hurting Crawford, especially when he opens up in the pocket, when he throws wide punches, and being that Errol is keeping his guard very tight, very good basic guard. Yeah, even then he can exploit it, but good thing for Crawford, I think, that at least from the strategic standpoint, that Errol Spence is not a counter puncher, and that he would have easier time because of it to set his offense on Errol Spence. Now, of course, after there are questions such as Crawford being that he would be a B-side, he would, even if he deserves the victory, he would probably get robbed. So unless maybe, and I'm saying maybe, if he whitewashes Errol Spence. But anyways, yeah, I do think that he would try to stop him late. So anyways, it's an interesting fight, but I'm just See, I already know the things that Spence does very well, but I'm just amazed at people who were watching this fight and saying now after this performance, Crawford stands no chance against Spence. To me, this fight didn't change my mind about Spence. I mean, it was a very good performance, and I'm certainly giving him a shot against Crawford for the said reasons. But I just cannot understand people, you know, being even more sure about Spence winning against Crawford based on this fight, this performance. I don't know.
I think the big question is whether the two fighters are going to get into the ring together, because
Yeah,
Bud Crawford was in attendance in Texas. Now, some people have made the argument, well, why not invite Bud Crawford into the ring and allow him to express his feelings and try and build the fight? But some people are
yeah,
saying both of these guys are devoid of any charm, personality, or character, and it would have been quite an embarrassing incident, because we know Errol Spence has got no personality whatsoever. He's to try and listen to some of his interviews is, for me, it would be a blessing to almost kill myself with a sledgehammer rather than watch any extended period. Bud Crawford the same as well, but pretty no coincidence that Bud is now in attendance to this fight, because he's pretty much ran out. He's exhausted all of the has-beens. He's been beaten up, and Bob Arum has clearly made a demarcation, or he's saying that you've been financially compensated more than sufficiently against the level of opposition that you faced, even though Bob has been complicit in all of that. You know, double standards in the choice of fighters, criticizing him before, but when they're fighting Crawford, they become world beaters. So they've all been playing this ridiculous game, but conversely, you know, the people criticizing Errol Spence, that he's done all of the hard work, he's cleared out of the division, and now Terence Crawford just wants to take advantage of that and fight for free belts. Well, why does Errol Spence just continuously continue with the rhetoric of fighting a Canelo or a Manny Pacquiao? He's chasing big money fights. Money is his proclivity, not necessarily legacy. Manny Pacquiao has a belt, so okay, that's a viable fight. He's got the WBA belt. If Errol beats him, then it strengthens his negotiating position up against Crawford. He can effectively say, probably a 70-30 to those sort of extremes. It's a big fight out as well, but the Manny Pacquiao is more of a cash out fight, and so is Canelo Alvarez. But Canelo Alvarez before was on the DAZN network, so that wouldn't have been an easy fight to make. But they don't really mention any of the negotiating problems in making the Crawford fight. Would also have been apparent if they're trying to fight a Canelo Alvarez. Manny Pacquiao would have been far more simplified because he was on some short-term PBC deal, or he was being advised by our Haymon, so that fight could have been an in-house, but I'm not sure how many fights Manny had with the PBC. I think it might have just been 2 or 3, something like that. Whether he had any options to extend it to one more, or what his contractual situation now is, or he's specifically with MP and he can just negotiate with anyone. He's an all-time great, so I'm sure they'll accommodate. They'll find a way should he want that fight. So I don't know, official. To me, I think both fighters have been complicit in not one party is solely to blame, but both sides are. But Errol Spence definitely has fought the better opposition, but that is only by virtue of the PBC having the fighters in house. So it's a convenient position to make that argument. It's not some sort of a conclusive argument. It's not like Errol's done all of the hard work. He's had the harder fighters, so he's been beaten up a little bit. There's more wear and tear on him. So Crawford has really had no opposition. It's kind of ironic because Crawford has been knocking at everybody, but they've been has-beens or whatever. They've been B-level fighters. Whereas Spence, he's had difficulties in all of his fights. Arguably lost against Sean Porter. Very, very competitive fight with, Garcia. When he's fought against these A-level fighters, he's Kell Brook, he had all sorts of problems as well until Brook's eye socket broke. He was behind on the cards, according to a lot of people. But that's a difficult fight in Sheffield, but he showed his dog. So, I don't know. I don't know what is going to happen going forward. If Terence is just simply attending the fighters, but they're not even acknowledging him, the PBC are not acknowledged. The PBC are now trying to perhaps put forward the candidacy of Josecito Lopez or Quadratilla Abdul Kakarov or Castillo Clayton or a Sean Porter rematch who's moving back into some sort of mandatory position. Yarde Sugas as the WBA regular belt that may be elevated to super. I don't know what's happening with Manny Pacquiao. So the PBC have got more than sufficient opponents for Errol Spence to fight and continue this round robin on financially raping the boxing public when 600 million people have lost their positions worldwide, and you want to carry on with this sort of bullshit. Nah, to me that's unacceptable.
Yeah, I do completely agree with you because this topic is something that I really wanted to address before the show. So yeah, I'll gladly do it. I don't think that things are so black and white in this situation. I think that there is a lot of gray area. And just like you're saying, I do think that both sides are to blame, at least partially. I'm not saying that they're equally wrong, but look, here is what has been happening. First of all, yeah, Crawford wants that fight against Errol Spence, and PBC, of course, they're doing their usual PBC thing, meaning fighting fights. How do you say it? In fights, yeah. Because even there's a much lesser risk, because even if Errol Spence loses, they get to keep their belts, and in that regard, yeah, I do think that either PBC, Errol Spence, they're ducking Crawford. Doesn't matter what is the reason. Is it them being scared he would lose against Crawford or anything else? But yeah, it's clearly the case to me, and yeah, it could be seen by the way PBC and the networks they have their fights on pay-per-views on are disrespecting, doing something that is very childish, not including Crawford as a belt holder in between the rounds when they're, or before the fights, when they're talking about the other notable champions, fighters, completely excluding everything that is not PBC. It's really it's just so low. I don't know. Hold on. What else I tried to say? Yeah, I mean, look, ESPN, for example, they were promoting this fight, PBC's fight in between Spence and Danny Garcia. I mean, this PBC just lacks a lot of class. It's so low to do it. I mean, speaking of some regular belt holders as champions, while ignoring Crawford. Crawford on his side, uh, yeah, he first of all in the beginning he ducked Pacquiao, as we already stated in the previous shows, ducked him a couple of times in a couple of ways, either asking him to move down to 140 or the other things which are a complete bullshit. Then when being offered the Porter fight, he refused it. And it's a great fight. I mean, I would still favor Crawford, and in fact, I would not necessarily expect that fight to go that way, but I think there's a very good chance of that fight looking similar to Crawford versus Hearn. Not saying that it would necessarily go that way, but at least in my opinion, there's a very good possibility of it playing out that way. But it's still a very good fight. Yeah, but I don't care. I don't want to. Yeah, go on.
Sean Porter could be the mandatory for the WBO Crawford or the WBC Spence. So that might just be a compromise to all of the people who are berating Terence Crawford. So if Sean Porter becomes his mandatory and they're saying, well, fight Porter before you fight Spence, fair enough. If Sean Porter decides to pursue that route, which I think it's a fresh perspective, it's a new fight we haven't seen before. They're obviously very good friends. And they were both fucking around a little bit when Sean was the champion before, saying he wouldn't fight Terence and back and forth. He says, she says, and the rest of that anecdotal bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, Maurice Blocker and Simon Brown were best of friends and they fought in the unification. So, you know, Evander Holyfield beat up the best man from his wedding. So Ricky Burns ended you know the world championship aspirations of his best friend Kevin Mitchell when he beat him up in Scotland. So this sort of shit goes on, and the Iguchi brothers fought for the strawweight, a classic in Japan for the Japanese minimum weight championship. Two brothers fought in an absolute yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah, it's a great
Yeah.
fight. As a fight, I'll try and cover in the video analysis later on because it's such hardly anybody knows about it, and it's the first time I think two brothers have fought for a championship belt. So don't start with all this friends nonsense, man, because I'll just give you those counter arguments just to break down your argument. But in any case, whatever happens, if it's Porter and then Spence after. But the problem is that both of them are not willing to give up their financial leverage. Crawford, reluctant to even reduce his wages during this lockdown period and have a fight, thinks he's the A side. We know the PBC's business model is all about the A side because they're doing that shit with all of their fighters. So that's why they're always pursuing this pay-per-view model so they can get prime negotiation position when it comes to these fighters, or they can extricate themselves. It's what companies do all the time in terms of their market capitalization as well. It's a bitch ass tactic.
Yeah.
But the fight has to be in front of a crowd, and it's going to be on some sort of a split network review. That's the only way it's going to happen. I can't see that's because Crawford is not going to concede by his sheer stubbornness and his arrogance, he's not going to concede.
Yeah,
He's going to want a split of the pay-per-view revenues in that case. If it's not going to be a 50-50 split, then he want a split of the gates and pay-per-view just to try and compensate for what he's losing as a guaranteed sum. So all of it, I don't know. I don't know. I think the fight will happen.
but maybe too late when they're both out of the primes.
Next
But
year, no reason why he shouldn't. No reason why he shouldn't. I don't know how many more mandatories Spence is going to have. Crawford, who was his last WBO mandatory? Was it Kafalowskis, Egidius? Could be. Kelvin was definitely a voluntary, so he's got a bit of time. No, the pay-per-view model is already in place. We already had it for Fury and Wilder, ESPN, Fox, whatever it was. So the mechanics are already in place. It can happen. That sort of contract is in place as well. It's a white label contract now that they can use simply on the back of that. So
yeah, the mechanics are there. They are the same. It's just the fighters and their faces there that are changing. You know, same thing will happen with this fight if it gets made. Just
yeah,
like with Fury Wilder.
I think
But
official at the moment that they're probably intentionally procrastinating the fight because of worldwide lockdowns at the moment. Well,
yeah,
lockdowns in the United
possible.
States at the moment. So there's no point in commencing negotiations now when there's no clear indications as to when a maximum capacity is going to be allowed by the governors in their state, etc., who have
Yeah,
the authoritative powers to decide that. So Texas is obviously a little bit more, given that they had, I don't know, what do they have, around 12,000 or something, I heard, around that figure.
Spence Garcia. It was on TV on Fox. They were mentioning 1,600. Then I heard somewhere else 1,500. But yeah, that's it.
Okay. 1,500, okay. And the
But
capacity of that stadium is around 60, 70,000.
something like that, yeah, I'm sure around 60 something thousand, because Canelo back then, when he was fighting there on that stadium, he had well, was it against Chavez or somebody else, or maybe even Smith, one of the Smith brothers, 60 or 55,000, something like that. So yeah, big capacity.
Did Manny Pacquiao fight Joshua Clottey there?
Yes, exactly.
That was in Dallas as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But let me just go back to, because I wanted to mention more things about all this who's ducking who talk between Spence and Crawford. Yeah, so look, definitely Crawford versus Porter would be a very good fight, but I don't want to waste time with it. I mean, if it happens, if it has to happen before he faces, and if he faces Spence, let's be it. I won't complain, especially since it would be his best opponent by far. Uh, but I want to see Crawford versus Spence first. Why? Because everybody is demanding it. Now, I was listening to BDA the last night, and this is one thing where I had to disagree with Precise, as well as I watched his new video today. Look, doesn't have to, you don't have it. It looks like putting another roadblock in between the fights. People are demanding that fight. Yeah, probably, I mean, not probably, it surely is the case that Crawford is unproven in front of an A-level opposition. But who gives a fuck anyways? We were already talking about Benavides chasing Crawford, and Benavides was nobody, and he finally got the opportunity to fight Crawford, perhaps late, and after suffering the bullet injury. But all I'm trying to say is that doesn't matter that then he didn't have an A-level opponent yet. Doesn't matter. The demand is high for that fight. I want to see it next. I would much rather see Crawford versus Spence in 2021 than Crawford Porter. You know, he can fight for sure. He can fight Porter afterwards, but I don't want to wait for it. Doesn't matter. By the way,
Plus, he's a who beat you. So why you want to beat Brooks' leftovers for now? To me, this makes no sense.
yeah, and yeah,
we were arguing before, and the fact that Porter will definitely be his most viable opponent, a fighter who, despite the losses in a long career, is still has very good athletic ability, still very good punch resistance, hasn't there's been visible degradation, been long in the tooth. So in that sense, he's not a has-been or a B-level fighter. So straight from the bat is a far more competitive fight. So yeah, if that is what the WBO pushes forward, then absolutely, I'm not going to complain about that. But if not, if you can get Errol Spence, and if that fight is possible, then you're 30. What is he? 34 now. He's a few years older than Errol. He's had a lot more fights than him as well. Fight him, you know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I'm saying, I wouldn't complain about it right now.
As well, so it's high risk, no reward at all. What are you doing it just to pacify the anti sort of Crawford boxing fans? What's the point? He's already a vilified character. People are not gonna give him some sort of redemption if he fights Porter and beats him. It's about, you know, the 1 and 2 in the division, or if you think Manny Pacquiao is not there, then fine. Then I say Errol Spence, Terence Crawford, one fight, settle it, and the winner fights Manny Pacquiao for a cash out in the Mid-East or wherever they fuck, and then all three of them retire.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, like you were saying earlier, now I'm back on that talk about who's backing who. Yeah, Spence was fighting the better opposition, and he's fighting a better opposition for sure. But it's just because PBC has all those fighters, and they at the same time they wouldn't let them go over and fight Crawford, because look, not only that Bob Arum was saying that he was trying to he was giving them good money to fight Crawford, which they were refusing, and it's, you cannot tell me it's not the case of Al Haymon telling them not to accept the offer, because he's ruling PBC, and he doesn't want to give Spence a big name, a known name on his resume, you know. So that way, by preventing his other fighters to go and fight Crawford, he is keeping the distance in popularity, etc., in between Errol Spence and Crawford. He's keeping a big distance in between them that way. So Crawford, even if he wanted, he cannot become a bit of a bigger name, you know, because if Al is telling his fighters not to accept the offer, despite them getting the best money they ever been offered, it shows you that those are the games, the bullshit games that Al Heyman and PBC are playing. So that's also why I'm not blaming Crawford. And this hasn't only happened with Crawford. I mean, first of all, for okay, a minor thing, a minor point before bringing a bigger one. Minor example is the same way they were preventing some of the welterweights to go and spar Pacquiao when Pacquiao invited them for his training camp before the Mayweather fight, but also around 2015 or 16, Bob was publicly making offers to Danny Garcia, to um, what's his name, Adrian Bronner, and the others, really giving them, offering them great money to fight Pacquiao, while Pacquiao was still on top rank in 2015 and 16, and they were refusing it. And so, of course, we know why it's happening, because Al Heyman is preventing them to go there, despite them being offered the biggest money of their careers. So that's all.
I think official, like with the Al Heyman business model now, it's in Al's vested interest for these marquee fighters, which he advises on, for them to become pay-per-view fighters, because that is why Spence has gone down the route not only of fighting all of the PBC welterweights in-house revenue, but also to fight a featherweight in Mikey Garcia, which is, for me, is not a legacy fight at all. But it's about the residual, the financial appeal that Mikey Garcia has. It's about trying to tap into his fan base, and it's trying to tap into the Hispanic community, who are amongst the biggest in boxing as well. So Al Heyman has a completely different financial structure with his fighters. He's not using his own revenue, he's using third-party revenue, but he has, from what I understand, is he has a higher leverage advisory fee. So why is it not advantageous for these fighters to be commanding record purses, 10, 15 million? So therefore Al Heyman will deduct for himself a higher advisory fee. It's just plain simple economics. And that is the reason why he's trying to get Errol Spence into that A side. You've got 80% shit, because it's a contingency for him as well, because if Spence loses, gets beaten up, or his career is ending, then Al Heyman is obviously benefited financially, because the boxing model goes on. You know, Spence is also in his 30s now, so it's business continuity. Al Heyman's vested interest is himself. That is why his personal disposable income is inversely correlated to the revenue of his company. How can that be the case? Name me one other company in which has happened, which has not been investigated for corruption.
Yeah.
That's like what Japan was doing with Zytec derivatives during the 80s. You know, you're artificially inflating it because you're counting capital gains on your balance sheet, which is ridiculous. So the value of your assets have gone up astronomically. I mean, the Royal Gardens, like in downtown Tokyo, was worth more than the entire land in California combined during the early 80s. because of these, because of the derivatives that the Japanese had created, the the Zytec derivatives. So Haymon is is using a, obviously not a complicated structure like that, but that's why he's been investigated for what happened with the PBC before, with the hedge fund that they received from Ivy Capital. They created a subsidiary of the Kansas City Investment Bank because that was regulated by the OCC. So to try and for a hedge fund, what they did is they created a subsidiary. So if they're trading just mutual and OTC derivatives, then those are not regulated. So that's how they were able to exploit that particular gap. So liability is very difficult, and it's very difficult to prove in court that you cannot. If you forecasted certain revenues for all of your investors, then you can just say, well, that was our anticipated profits, but it's clearly not been the case. But Al Haymon at the same time has become exorbitantly wealthy because if he has a massive budget, then he clearly is going to overpay his fighters because, number one, it also gets him loyalty. They're not going to leave if they're well paid, are they? But number two, then he's guaranteed a fixed income from his advisory fee, and that's his vested interest. Whether the company profits or not, it doesn't matter. His personal wealth goes up and up. So it's a crazy business model, really designed for him, but people don't really see it that way.
Yeah, they were talking about him as a savior of boxing, while in reality, it was in his own interest to pay fighters as much money as he was paying them, because out of all those paydays, he was getting his percentage. So the bigger their gains were for the fights, more money he was getting per fight.
Yeah, and we know with the Fox that they don't have an uncapped repository of money for the fights as well. They have an annual budget, and Jimmy has already talked about the budget being they've not been the revenue and what they've derived from the Tyson Fury and the Tyson and the Deontay Wilder, paying these guys 20 million or so each in the fight. I'm not sure what the pay-per-view sales were, but they may have just broke even, but they haven't made any significant profit on that. I don't think
Exactly.
the Tank pay-per-views recently have been successful. The Jamel and Jamal Charlo pay-per-view card. But what the pay-per-view essentially does is it kinds of, the difference between their capital and their leverage is not as such, because the pay-per-view essentially pays for the purses of the fighters. So I'll give you a different example. The Eddie Hearns Matchroom have actually been financing snooker in the UK from their own Matchroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been, that's an example of them during this. They've been using their own income to actually finance some of these tournaments, like the UK Championship very recently. Do you think Al Haymon would ever do something like that?
Of course not. Yeah, all he's doing is he got that money, which is not his, and so he's at no risk at losing it. He doesn't care if he loses it or not, because it's not his money.
Yeah, that's a typical OTC derivatives SEC managed model. That's what all of these investment banks do with. That's how they speculate on the market. They create 97% of all of the money is created by these banks that are thin, and then they speculate on the stock market. And then once investor confidence goes and credit is significantly reduced, then that threatens the economy substantially. That's how they've been able to manipulate the world for 200 years. And therefore, the central bank has to monetize that debt for them. Haymon has something very similar in that sense. He's got there's no, he doesn't have what I'm saying is he doesn't have the liability the way that the business model is structured for him. So win-win for him either way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good on him.
So
Good on him. That's what a Harvard education does. You're able to explain.
Yeah, that's true. Good play.
That's why the wealth is controlled by just 8% of the people, That's why
Yeah.
that's why 80% of the population live under $100 a week.
Exactly. Yeah, and Andre Rodriguez in the chat room is saying the pay-per-view is a more complex business because the media companies have a big share of the pie too. So promoters started to put their own fighters in deals with specific channels. Well, regarding pay-per-views, of course, when you don't have enough money to pay the money that like Terence Crawford, for example, Bob Arum didn't have enough of money to pay that the money he was asking for, so he was obligated to put it to set it up as a pay-per-view. Yeah, I mean, TV company would get 50%.
Yes, that's the key. The carrier will take 50%, and the fighters will have to take the split of the residual 50% between them. So how on earth is that going to generate a lot of money? It isn't, unless you're getting at least a minimum of around sort of 400 or 500K. If you're paying them the sort of 9-figure sums that you are. So depending if it's an $80 model, then around 300 you'll maybe break even on the 6 million purse each. Anything more than that, then you need at least 100,000 to cover the extra 4 million each. So yeah.
I would say that they're especially when those pay-per-views are not selling much, when they're selling as poorly as Crawford's or somebody else's pay-per-views. Well, they're not really earning money, but at least with pay-per-views they can minimize the money that they will lose because. If it's not a pay-per-view, you have to put out your own money from my understanding. While pay-per-view is different, people are going to pay for it, to pay to watch it. So I mean,
people just had the mic pay-per-view that was what $50, and now there's $79.99. And believe it or not, the Anthony Yarde fight was actually beat. ESPN didn't carry that fight, so I think the fight was available on Fight TV or something like that for around $20 in the US, which a lot of people were pissed off about. So I wonder how many people bought that. So how many pay-per-views are these guys going to have, one after the other? But what they're going to do with Errol Spence now, that they've set a precedent for him. Clearly, they're trying to make him the A side, and they're not going to revert from a pay-per-view model when it comes to him. He's a pay-per-view fighter now, so his purses are not going to be depreciating. They've set a precedent. They're going to have to carry on with this model until they can get all of the belts or whatever their strategy is going forward. So it's just going to be so, unless if it's not going to be Terence Crawford the next fight, it's just going to be frustration. So you're just going on inelasticities of demand from boxing fans to say, look, Errol Spence, undefeated, unified champion. You're just tapping into their psyche in that way, just to try and market the fight and justify the fight being on pay-per-view. That's all you can do, and just hoping that whether you're tapping into some sort of racial bias with the fans or whatever it is, or wherever he is domiciled from, to try and get their fans, you're just preying on their loyalty rather than the credibility or the marketability of a fight. And that for me is very, very sad. The way boxing fans are just sort of capitulating and accepting this garbage, like boxing is an absolute necessity for them. That's all nonsense, man. If they don't demand it, they don't watch it, and it's reflected in the numbers, then the carriers will then demand the best fight. That is the only way you're going to get change. Otherwise, they will just continue proliferating this model and prying on the insecurities and the stupidity and the ridiculous generosity of these fighters in these sort of crazy economic times.
And something that also Jimmy mentioned on one of the shows was that, and he was right, just how that model is has a short sight, is so short-sighted. Yeah, you can promote your fighters based on his race or anything like that, but just like maybe it's a bad example, but just like Wilder, what did before when he had that big YouTube moment when being interviewed by Radio Raham. It may give you a boost, of popularity, and he even started a his own clothing line based on that interview. But in reality, it closes. I mean, it creates a diversion in between fans. At the same time, you're closing, you're pushing away many other potential fans of yours. So you may get some hardcore fans, who are into that racial talk, etc. But you will never get a whole country watching your fights, stand behind you.
Go and look at Manny Pacquiao in the Philippines. And look at the government and the rebels, and the singularity when he fights, and look at it anywhere else around the world. So just a completely different. Very, very hard to even fathom that. Whereas in the States, you've got nothing but race baiters, race hustlers. If it's from the promotional standpoint or the fighter trying to, in the case of Deontay Wilder, with this, who's been manipulated, that he thinks that are his friends, they all know it's absolute bullshit, and they're making money off. Pharaoh is made what somebody was telling me around $150,000 a visual by proliferating rubbish, which he knows is rubbish, but the gullibility and the stupidity of the people that just believe it will just keep contributing and giving him money so he can just carry on, and Deontay Wilder just falling for it as well. It's just extraordinary. That's why corruption in the United States is higher than it is anywhere else on the planet.
Yeah,
that's why the head of the House, and Nancy Pelosi, can have that's why Nancy Pelosi's net worth is 140 million pounds, despite her overseeing legislation for what, 3 decades, because she gets exclusive IPO contracts, IPO offerings, cents on the dollar. After day one, her profits go up by 100%, but at the same time, it's because she's overseeing legislation for those clients. So it's just, but the way they've passed the act in the States, it's technically not corruption, but it is to anybody who understands it.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is one of the most powerful legal apparatus in the United States. That's what goes on. The corruption in the States is just, once upon a time we talked about how teachers would just propagate to us that Latin America or sub-Saharan Africa or whatever, that is the place that is abundant with nothing compared to the States.
Yeah, when you see what's happening, man. And it's all happening right in front of you, publicly. You see what's happening, but yeah.
Why do you think the Pentagon was hit during September the 11th? That's all I'll say. Something about $17 trillion missing.
Sure.
Yeah.
By the way, so Andre Rodriguez and Precise Fight Film are talking about pay-per-views in the chat, and I would agree with Precise with what he's saying. The problem is fans buying pay-per-views. Any pay-per-view. Yeah. And I wanted to bring you in because in one of the recent shows I heard you saying that, and it's so completely true, because the fans, they have no basic knowledge. They do really think that they're helping boxing by buying those pay-per-views instead of ignoring something that is already, I don't know, I cannot find the right words, I cannot express myself the right way, but instead of supporting boxing, that they're just supporting a model that's terrible.
Yeah. Boxing fans need to stand up. They need to be a little bit more adamant in what they want. You got to fight for what you want. You can't capitulate to what the networks are giving you. You have it's not enforced upon you. You have a choice whether you wish to watch, whether you wish to buy. And if you carry on buying, then clearly you're part of the problem. So stop fucking complaining then.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're voting with your own pocket, and so if they're, instead of giving you the real fights, the fights you really want to see, the absolute best fighting, the absolute best number one fighting number two, instead they're giving you, number one fighting number 10 on a pay-per-view, and on top of that you're going to buy it. Fuck no.
Yeah, and apps like DAZN is not going to, that's not going to, for the reasons we already mentioned before. How enough are you going to tumble down the economies of scale and the market share and of ESPN, Disney, Fox, all of them, people have grown up with over the years, and they do it best because they have the major sports, which generates all of the revenue for them, NFA, NBL, but then therefore they're very clever enough to put boxing on as well. So they have the trickle down effect. What is maybe they rely on if it's not specific boxing fans that are subscribing to whether it's on the free networks or the satellites or the cable networks. So for DAZN to enter into that market and for them to have to wait around 6-7 years to try and buy out the rights, the only way they're going to get it is if they buy out the rights. They outbid ESPN, say, on NFL, That's the only way boxing is going to flourish in the United States. If you get a major sport like that and you have the monopoly on it, or whatever the split is, and we're seeing it now in the UK, and I think we got a changing of the guard. Amazon Prime, or whatever they're called, has now bought exclusive rights for the Barclays Football Premiership, which is the most watched on the planet. It's a massive cash cow. So Amazon are definitely now venturing into. We know they've gone into home security. They've gone into face recognition for the police, etc. So Jeff Bezos has also got the Washington Post. So they've got the media communications as well. So great propaganda for all of their scams around the world, etc. But in terms of sports, I mean, given the market capitalization they have, they could get they could get a hell of a monopoly network as well. And if they start getting involved in boxing, then they've clearly got the capital to get the fights. And Amazon is a big enough name. Look at they've got more lobbyists than there are senators. Barack Obama is one of their major lobbyists. Look at the amount of money he makes as well. So telling me if they were to get into boxing and you've got Barack going on and race baiting with all of the African Americans about boxing on there, etc., that's money for them. So if they wanted to pursue or go down that line, they are the zone that they would be non-existent.
Okay, so it's been go on.
Extended one on that one.
Sorry, I could not hear you.
It's a bit of an extending discussion there on the economics of pay-per-views and networks, but good discussion, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, I cannot wait to when I go back and rewatch it to listen to this part again, because I feel like I missed a couple of things, and when I go back and rewatch it, hear it again, yeah, it's pretty interesting everything. But I got really tired because it's been 3 hours 45 minutes. We are live on air, so we were supposed to do the breakdown of Rodriguez. Do you want us to do it now? Because I can do it, but I'm wondering for you if you're time restricted. If
Yes, I am, yeah. And
hmm,
what I would recommend, official, is let's do it as a specific only, where we can try and fit in a quick midweek show, just specifically covering it just before the fight at the weekend. I think it would be great if we can maybe do an hour just covering it at some point, so it'll be fresh on everybody's mind. Everybody is still all of their attention span. You'll be re-energized. I'll be re-energized as well.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm understanding you. Are you saying that we are gonna do an extra show instead
Yeah,
of simply doing it the next week?
yeah. That would be my proposal. Why not we try?
Great.
Why not we try and fit in maybe an hour between now and Saturday, or the early hours of Sunday? Do it as a special.
Uh, yeah, but I fear we'll need 2 hours because only look, I analyzed Rodriguez's fights, and so I only used two of his fights,
Okay.
and I have a lot of clips, a lot of interesting things to talk about. Yeah, of course we can keep it short, but I think that realistically, just talking about Manny Rodriguez would take us an hour alone, maybe an hour and a quarter. So, would you be okay with 2 hours long show, maybe even two and a half?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nah.
Fine. I yeah. I think there's little point in sort of going to 4 or 5 hours on here. Um, let's have a look who's still around. How many people we've got? Still, but it doesn't matter. We the, the views is not really our proclivity. We want to try and obviously
Yeah.
give give the best sort of the best of our ability, and focus on that. So I've got a lot of notes on the fight, and I want to translate some of them into video clips as well. So why not? If you can manage it, I'll try and work around your schedule, and yeah, let me know whenever. But I'll try and devote 2 hours to it. Yeah, fine, no problem.
Nice. Wait, the only thing is, let me see when that fight is happening exactly. Yeah, on December 19th. So let me see my schedule.
Oh, that's okay. So that's
Oh,
next week. Yeah, it's exactly.
yeah, it's in 2 weeks. My
Yeah.
only,
Oh,
yeah,
sufficient.
go on.
Got more than sufficient time then. So if it doesn't happen, then we can maybe jump it on next week's show. Your choice,
Uh,
whatever's.
uh, Yeah, okay. So look, what I want to say, I would love to have a special show for this fight only,
Okay.
especially since I would have a lot of material, and I haven't done my material on Donaire yet, but I'm sure there is gonna be at least as much material as I have on Rodriguez, and I have a lot. But the thing is, if we do it the same week, on the week of the fight, um, I'm worried about my working schedule, because the next week I'll be ending my work at 8:30 p.m. So I'm not sure I would be able to squeeze in an episode, unless we do it later at night, and hoping that I don't get interrupted by work.
Yeah. Okay. Because after next week, I've got to leave the country for a week anyway. So okay.
Oh, okay. So yeah. Anyways, what's happening the next week? Let's see. Yeah, Egginton fighting TFN Ashley, AJ Pulev, Okoli Glovatsky, Fury Vach, Bakoli, Kuzmin, Shakur Stevenson, Ken Clary. Chris Colbert is fighting Jaime Arboleda, and those are the fights for the next week. By the way, it got announced. Well, it's not a surprise, but Daigo Higa will be fighting on the undercard of Ioka versus Tanaka. But those are the fights for the next week.
Okay. Kishtof, Blavatsky, and Aaron Sokoli. Interesting fight. That'll be for the vacant world championship, I presume. Yeah.
It says WBO cruiserweight title. It's not written if it's vacant or not. Just saying a WBO cruiserweight title.
Okay. Lauren Zaccoli just has one of those absolutely aesthetically horrible styles, but somehow it's effective. Um, yeah, okay. So we'll cover that. We'll cover that next week.
All right.
Yep. So that's enough of me.
Okay. In that case, well, thank you for joining in, as well as to Vader D, Andre Rodriguez, L Dog, um, Precise Fight Film. There was Shep here earlier, Philo Bedo, Box, Mateus Lise, James Thornton, Overhand, big up to you, Dell, Blue Collar Sports TV. Uh, if anyone doesn't know and visit his channel, he's a well-established boxing channel here on YouTube. We know him for years. Um, Buzz, Jack, who else? Another Jack. Not sure if it's the same one. Triple JJJ, Saint Brit. By the way, I haven't heard of Duck in a while, but big up to him. Alone, big up. Who else is there? Yeah, I think that was it. Anyways, thank you to anyone watching. Hope you enjoyed the show.
So precise is saying that Blavatsky might be out of the fight. I haven't heard that, but interesting.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't even know. I wasn't completely unaware of the fights that were taking place on that card. So I don't know. Well, yeah, interesting.
It's ridiculous. I mean, you've had false positives which have got the England cricket team back from South Africa as well. So I place no confidence in any of the tests. There was no way the cricketers had tested positive. You know, they had a strict code which they were pertaining to, and that's just about. That's going to go to the courts now in terms of the financial wranglings. But yeah, anyway, thanks for the heads up, precise. Yeah, Lawrence Okoli, he'll probably hug his way to the World Championship. So it's bollocks.
Yeah, and Vader D in the chat room is confirming it. Okoli fight is off replacement opponent. Yeah, so we'll have to check who's that replacement gonna be. But anyways, yeah, thank you for being here with us. If you don't mind, share the show. It would help us grow. So certainly share if you can. Hit the like, subscribe if you enjoy the show. See you the next time. By the way, yeah, we were not able to go live the last night, so you had a late Monday episode. But see you this Sunday. Sorry.
Yeah, a little bit difficult. So apologies for that, and apologies for the late start of this show as well. But thank you for all those for your patience throughout this 3.5 hours. Sometimes we don't even realize when we get immersed into the conversation.
Yeah.
Don't really give a fuck, as I said from the start. You know, that's the style of and the focus of the show. You know, we're not going to try and minimize it for any specific purpose. You know, free flowing, express anything you want to express. You know, I'm sure not all of it is been boring. I'm sure a lot of it has been riveting. You've got very insightful people here, so maybe there's something you didn't learn today. So for that 3.5 hours patience, you know, some benefit.
It's already 4 hours. That's how fast the time is flying.
Anyway, sayonara.